So for those of you who have noticed, Chair Huebner is going to be a little bit late this morning, so I will be stepping in, getting this underway because I know we have a busy morning and we all want to get on to our other business. Good morning. The October 24th Board of Directors meeting is called to order. First, I would like to ask our interpreters to explain how to access interpretation. Please go ahead.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting scrolls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio not to hear the original Spanish in the background. Headsets are available for the interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por la intérprete. Para hacer el uso de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación globoterráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos 3, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés o en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedirlos auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, the Gueño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, and protected and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the Sandag community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. With that, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Francesca, can you please confirm quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum. Currently absent are the City of Coronado, City of Del Mar, City of National City, City of Poway, and City of Solana Beach.
All right, thank you, Francesca. Can you please go over the remote attendee procedures?
Yes, thank you. We have one remote board member this morning, so I'll need to confirm some information with Deputy Mayor Melendez before we start. Deputy Mayor Melendez, could you please confirm for us that you're able to leave your camera on during the course of the meeting?
Yes, it is on. Can you see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. And can you also disclose any person over the age of 18 that's in the room with you currently and state their relationship to you?
No one's in the room.
Perfect. And could you briefly describe the reason for your remote participation without disclosing any personal medical information?
Yes, thank you. I'm taking care of a family member who's sick.
All right, thank you. That does qualify. So we can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Francesca. Let's move on to non-agenda public comment.
We have 4 members of the public who'd like to speak on non-agenda. More hands are going up. 6 members. We'll start with the folks in the room with Truth and then go to allegedly Audra.
Hi there, everybody. I hope you're all listening closely and getting a really good look at me today. Soak it in, because you may never see me again. And that is not a joke, it's real life. I'm forcibly moving to an unknown destination. You can figure what out that means, you know? So ironically, I'm ready for a speech on housing. California is the only state with an alleged housing crisis, AKA where the American dream is reserved for the rich. Solutions: death penalty for arsonists, in fire map disclosure for home cells, ban fire-prone battery energy storage sites, in VMT, in RENA quotas, stop tenant protection acts on the rental market, and through endless ADUs that encourage owners to sell instead of rent. Waive all fees on single-family homes. Remove the ability for anyone to sue on CEQA with zero evidence, which forces developers to cover attorney's fees by increasing housing costs. Create tax breaks for single-family home developments. Remove all EV chargers and parking space requirements. Remove all electric requirements. Remove solar requirements. Remove the corrupt DIE insurance commissioner and end the government monopoly on insurance. Stack and Packs at Transit does not stop people from needing a car or a bigger house for their families. More people use transit to go to a game. It'd make more sense to build stadiums next to transit than Stack and Packs. Every city has Stack and Packs, yet prices keep going up because those new developments are gentrifying neighborhoods. The build, baby, build theory has only benefited corporate developers. If the obstacles to affordable single-family homes are not resolved, this state will lose even more people and financially fall apart. And there won't be enough illegals to fill the Stack and Pack Potemkins to transit, to pick the crops for the modern-day California slave masters. Find out what the other 47 states who've absorbed record amounts of California refugees and where one could buy a mansion for the size of a crummy box here are doing right. Copy it and improve it. Because if any of you have appreciated what I've done, you can understand why I fought so hard. Because now I have to go somewhere else, and I will fight there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Casey.
So I'm here again to address some things. Luckily, you guys are working on your technical difficulties with the Zoom and playing the video of Malika and Zaya crying when they're being separated from their families. And I wanted to let you know that the county has now terminated reunification, and so that crying is probably going to continue for a very long time. And the county is also, again, hiding sexual abuse, and they never really made the case about the kids. They've made it about being exposed. They've said that I'm coaching this little girl to say that she's being sexually abused, and so they don't want to even bring me into the trial because that would be detrimental to the case, because it would make them know that it's detrimental to keep them in the care that they are. But you know what's interesting is they use the same little girl's testimony of saying that she saw her dad when she hasn't in over a year, to use that to terminate parental rights. How crazy is that? If you see your parent, even though you didn't, but if they think you did, then they will terminate your family. It's egregious what's going on. And it's very sad because everybody lives their life like we have all this time in the world. Nobody is promised tomorrow. And we all have a chance to course correct because we are all sinners that are saved by grace. And we should be acting accordingly. But it's sad that this kind of stuff can happen in the county, that children can be abused, and it falls upon deaf ears. All of the people that could do something sit there and say, just follow along and they'll give your kids back. That's not the plan, because it's a lucrative business to traffic children through the government services that you guys all are a part of.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Casey, followed by Blair Beekman.
Hi everyone, my name's Casey. I'm a high school student and I'm sure you've seen me here before. Honestly, I shouldn't have to be here. It's my day off. Everyone else my age is sleeping in and not coming to a SANDAG meeting. But I'm here because SANDAG keeps failing us over and over again. You have the power to do better for transit riders and you keep choosing not to. Yesterday and today, over 40 schools across San Diego will be walking out for climate action. What are you going to tell people my age? That you ignored us? This summer, we interviewed transit riders across San Diego, including a fourth grader, and I want to play his words for you because he deserves better too. This regional plan fails working riders and it fails to meet emission reductions we need for our climate future. Please do better for our transit riders, pedestrians, and cyclists, and please listen to what kids in our region have to say.
Hi, Sandag. My name is Dylan. I'm in fourth grade and I take the bus and trolley with my big brother all the time. Sometimes we wait a really long time. Sometimes the stop doesn't feel safe, especially when it's dark and there's no place to sit. But we still take it because we have to. It's how we get around. I want better buses and trolleys, shorter waits so we're not late, safer stops so my mom doesn't worry, a ride that actually works for kids like me and for families who count on it every day. I know I'm just a kid, but I notice when things don't work, and I notice when people don't listen. If we had a better transit system, I'd use it even more, and I know a lot of other students would too. We just need someone to care enough to fix it.
Sandag, please listen to fourth graders like Dylan who want better transit, who don't feel safe at our current transit stops, and promise them that you'll be making changes now, not 40 years in the future. We are living through a climate crisis, and Sandag has the power to do better. Please do better as the board of directors.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman, followed by Cesar Javier.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman, happy Friday. Thanks for the meeting today. I could really hear the recording well over Zoom from the previous speaker. That was a problem in the past with DRA. So the recordings are working over Zoom now. Thank you. Good luck that the recordings can be presented on YouTube or however you have to work that out for the previous YouTube Sandag meetings that haven't made it to YouTube recently. Good luck to the work of DRA at this time. Thank you for her efforts. I'm hearing and listening to what you're saying, and I'm taking it in, so it's important. You are being heard, DRA. And good luck to Truth. I hope she can stay in San Diego County. With that all said, I wanted to comment my two big talking points for Sandag these days. Really good luck that with the Los San corridor issues that we talk about environmental concerns. That can be an open subject matter, and we don't fear having that to be an open subject matter. We know environment is important to talk about the corridor area, but we don't make that an open conversation enough, I feel. Good luck on those efforts. And that the current double tracking is for short distances. It's quite possible we could keep those short distances permanently. We don't necessarily have to double track the whole thing permanently. Good luck to realize that and consider that for our future. And then also, good luck with border issues and the tech involved in the future of toll border issues. That doesn't have to be a Fort Knox system under lock and key of the federal government. We can ask them for some information. It's work and effort. Good luck how we can do that. With my final time, good work in San Francisco Bay Area. They've actually limited Trump over militarization is what I've been asking yourselves how we can do that down here in San Diego. It's conversation, it's dialogue, and we can convince. Good luck how we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 additional speakers. Our next speaker will be Cesar Javier, followed by the person with the phone number ending in 8813.
Hi, this is Cesar Javier, victim of ceramic skin toxicity, which has been since 1984. And we would like again to voice our concern. This is about community sustainability. Councilor Lacaba, Councilor Rivera, and the 9 of you elected officials. You have done nothing since. It's been 4 years ago. Remember, Councilor Lacaba, you declared to us, senior, from a gentleman's word, I will talk to Councilor Rivera. And now, September 16, 2025, finally, you declared again, I will talk to you, Mr. Javier, at my office regarding your ceramic scale concern. Thank you, Mr. Lacaba. Second time, I I am expecting a gentleman's, shall we say, words. Councilor Rivera, please don't lie to us. You told us to reach air pollution control district only to discover that you are a governing board member along with the mayor. What are you doing with the air pollution governing body? This is an issue that is termed also or dubbed as environmental justice issue. Why can't we do something? Is it a leadership failure as what is happening now in the Tijuana Valley uh, river pollution, air pollution, land pollution, water pollution, coastal pollution, saltwater pollution? What have you done? You are accountable in here.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the person with the phone number ending in 8813, followed by Paul the Bold.
Okay, Consuelo here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so excuse me. First off, I wanted to talk about how the SANDAG agency continues to do nothing better to better the nothing to better the lives, and only impose what the UN agenda wants throughout the county, instead of helping and making real change to truly help our county and the younger generations. And with that being said, it's so disgusting to see how these younger people are used as political props. I've said this before. And to the young Casey kid, I don't know how young you are or how old you are, please wake up and smell the propaganda. And it's so sad that you're being used. And I'm sorry, but that phone call from Dylan, the fourth grader or fifth grader, felt so fake. So shame on SANDAG, and shame on anybody who continues to use kids as political props. Let's see, recap of the Board of Supervisors. Once again, Paloma, Tara, and Monica. Paloma bringing her foul IB sewage self to the Board of Supervisors, voting against what the people want, continuing to be divisive with things regarding representation from the people of Lincoln Park, and always, I swear, always having to mention ethnicity. Oh, like there's this it's like, you know what? It doesn't matter if Mexicans, Blacks, Filipinos, whites, whomever live in a certain area, just help them. I mean, it's like the people who claim to be trying to bring people together are the most divisive and do what they can to continue to separate and divide us. And that is sick. Like nobody cares what ethnicity is anymore. Everybody needs help. Let's.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our final speaker will be Paul the Bold. You can go ahead.
Okay, you were doing some good things like opening up the dialogue or trying to seat representatives for the entire county, but you are wasting a lot of money, our money, on projects that you begin and they lie fallow for years, rotting away or becoming obsolescent and needing further money thrown at them. There are also projects such as the bikeways that are hardly used. And there are projects like the downtown stopover, which you have spent years of planning on, when you could have simply rented a space to have a quick snack or empty out. Safety needs to be prioritized. The bikeways cross dangerous freeway exits and are along busy streets and highways without separation from the regular traffic. So what's the use of making bikeway? Incremental depopulation? Or evac routes? They need to be there and not blocked by roundabouts or wider sidewalks. Audits show continued problems with sole source and favored contractors. A solution is to make these public. Even the sole source justifications this meeting are not right. Finally, it is time to recognize that current GHG schemes are a failure, and it is plastics which do GHG's global warming and poison us and everything else. So, I mean, that is a lot more important. You know, feel free to call in and give us a bit of truth from now and from time to time. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Any non-agenda member comments at this time? Yes.
Good morning, fellow board members and chair. On behalf of MTS, I want to express sincere condolences to the City of La Mesa and the Police Department for the loss of Officer Lauren Craven this past week. Our team has the utmost respect for the department's professionalism and the work they do every day for the residents of La Mesa and MTS riders. We want to stand by your side and you all in our thoughts and prayers during this very difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And actually, before we move any further, I would like to acknowledge the loss of Officer Lauren Craven of the La Mesa Police Department. Her actions exemplified the highest ideals of public service. She placed the safety of others ahead of her own, coming upon a dangerous scene and immediately stepping in to help. I'd like to take a moment of silence now to honor Officer Craven and keep her family, her colleagues, and all first responders in our thoughts. All right, now, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mario for his update.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of agency-wide updates. Leadership from SANDAG and SCAG met earlier this week, including our Chair, Hebner, and Board's Chair, Carolina Chavez. Our regions face similar challenges, and this was a valuable opportunity to discuss those common challenges, our strategic goals, legislative priorities, common legislative priorities, and building upon partnerships. It was really interesting hearing from SCAC on their plan and how they're coordinating for the Olympics with multiple agencies and how they're planning to bring us on board for those discussions also. I also want to thank our Borders Committee Chair, Carolina Chavez, and Mayor Duncan for attending the San Diego Chamber of Commerce trip to Mexico City and up to a point representing this region. We really appreciate the discussions you all led over there. They're going to lead us a long way in those partnerships and those discussions. I also want to inform the board that our Senior Director for Regional Planning, Antoinette Mayer, will be presenting at a joint meeting for the California Transportation Commission, the California Air Resources Board, and the Housing Department on November 6th. This is going to be in a panel discussion where SANDAG, together with Caltrans and the other major MPOs of the state, will be discussing the potential impacts for air conformity lockdown. I think what I want to explain a little bit, this is the federal government removed some of the waivers that the state had. So now Air Resources, California Air Resources Board, and EPA are having discussions how the different regions can provide the information for attainment and reaching the goals of air emission targets for air conformity. So those discussions are occurring. There have been a lot of questions about what the impacts could be. We are the first agency that would be impacted sometime in January, and then a couple of months later, SCAC will also be impacted. And what would happen is that any region, any city, the state, agency, or us would not be able to make amendments to our regional transportation improvement plan if there was a major funding change or schedule change or something major on it. If you need more details, Antoinette can provide those details either one-on-one or here in any questions you bring up. but she will be presenting and exposing the problem together with the rest of the state. This is not a SANDAG issue only. This is a statewide issue. So hopefully we can get to a good point, and more than anything, ARB and US EPA can get to a good point in consensus of how this can be achieved. I had a long discussion item here on DVE updates. And what I can tell you is that there was an interim final rule issued by the Department of Transportation and on how we deal with DVE. Basically, it's been suspended temporarily. But all the other things I had written, I'm not going to say them because this morning things are still evolving and we got some more guidance from DOT. So I think what I can say is that we're monitoring the situation, we're assessing it, we're working with the federal DOT as well as Caltrans, which is one of the overseers of this subject in behalf of the federal government, and we are working on complying with all the rules and regulations that are being presented to us. But this is a evolving item, but we're basically suspending our DVE program. The details of how we're doing that, we're going to be tracking it based on the Q&As that came out this morning. So I think that's as much as I have to say about it. A couple of project updates. Just our regional plan, the EIR comment period closed. We got about 200 comments. And the team will be bringing in the EIR in the regional plan for discussion and consideration and hopefully approval in December 12th. The Lawson realignment, we're basically still working with High-Speed Rail to become our NEPA lead agency. High-Speed Rail should be submitting the request, the official request for FRA, and we'll be waiting for a ruling. And our goal is to have a lead agency a NEPA lead agency for this project by January. There will be an absolute work window, basically a closure of the Lawson rail line this weekend for the Del Mar Bluffs project, as well as the Batiquitos Lagoon double track project. Also in the city of San Diego, for the Eastern Hillcrest Bikeway, crews will modify the travel lanes on 10th Avenue between University Avenue and State Route 163. There will be appropriate detour signs, and this will take this temporary change in traffic patterns will be ongoing for the couple of months. Just as an FYI, there was a major, as you all know, a major Amazon Web Services outage last Monday. SANDAG wasn't immune to being impacted. Our customer service center was impacted, and certain parts of our services weren't available during that day. We're up online on everything, and we were able to deal with the public coming in person. That concludes my update.
Thanks, Mauro. And before we move on to consent, I'd like to welcome our newest member to the board, and that is Imperial County Supervisor Martha Cardenas-Singh. This is your first meeting. Thank you so much for being here. We welcome you. Good morning. All right, now on to consent. Francesca, do we have public comments on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Chair. We do. We have 3 members of the public who'd like to speak. First Truth, then allegedly Audra.
Mario's update sounds like California is going down. On DBE in 2021, Minto said equity may one day go out of fashion. Here we are. Item 3.1. The minutes, I don't see the YouTube link to the meeting, and it's negligent to not report on the actions taken by the board. Is that when Minto was super late and where Quid Pro Joel was late and then he left early? I'm wondering, how does he collect a stipend other than the taxpayer-funded coffee and food he always bolts for rather than his seat? Item 3.2, I heard Lemon Grove Councilmember Jennifer Mendoza say that the Transportation Committee said they believe the Youth Trafficking Opportunity Pass encourages transit ridership. I guess SANDAG is going to ignore why MTS is increasing transit fares. Have you ever seen 2 guys in wheelchairs about to stab each other? I have, on a trolley, and every child who rode that day also saw it. Great program, YOPS. The Executive Committee had no business approving any bill from psychotic Scott Peters, especially not one encouraging more Pointless, stack and packs near transit for the rich. These policies are failing. Why would you want more of the same? Item 3.3, 275,000 more to a bikeway going on 13.5 million. How can the anticipated administration costs suddenly go up? How could a city and or SANDAG not know what the admin costs would be unless something went wrong? Transparency is missing. 650,000 on consultant, Quarles and Bradley for several mystery employment matters. What happened to sole source reason number 4? It just says no longer used. Is there going to be a renumbering? Or are we just going to ignore number 4 from now on? On the grant for the county, it's talking about bullfrog eradication in Ramona, but then the justification says low bullfrog activity. So were bullfrogs going to be killed and they didn't show up? Is the county going to kill bullfrogs at a later date? I'm well acquainted with the county hating animals, but the item seriously needs a detailed explanation. And as always, no to the human traffickers, Jewish Family Service being given 1 penny of our tax dollars for any reason. If anything, they should be charged with several federal offenses for the harm they caused. Where is Trump? Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of other hands went up right at the beginning there, so we actually have a total of 5 additional speakers. Next will be allegedly Audra, and then Paul the Bold.
Yeah, Jewish Family Services trafficked the unaccompanied minors that came across the border that nobody cares about, but nobody cares that children are trafficked, so whatever. The CEO delegated actions. I'm waiting to see when you're going to delegate and put forward something that is going to, put people in a place of safety when they're evacuating. I mean, because at this point, we're setting people up to be killed in a fire, not be able to get out, and we keep implementing all of these things that you're claiming is going to save the planet, but I'm wondering when we're going to care about people first at some point, right? I mean, we walk by them on the street and probably you guys stick your nose up and go, oh my gosh, they're homeless, instead of going, how can I help you? It's interesting, because I mean, people just die in Tent City, right, Joe? And, Kent Lee, but nobody cares about that. So it's just, I'm wondering when that's going to happen and when you're going to bring forward something that is proving that everything that you're doing as far as the climate action plan and all of that stuff goes is legit, and there's no other data that you need to bring in to say, maybe I need to see, are there things that are happening around us like geoengineering that we should be concerned about if we care about the planet, and say this is the best option is to put people densely populated, get them out of their cars, make it so they can't evacuate. I mean, and also you guys can make money and control the people. So when are you going to bring forward things that are actually going to protect the people? Because you guys say that that's what you are trying to do. But when you totally ignore things like the Clear Skies Act and act like they're not spraying above us, and that doesn't affect even the air, the water, and everything that we're supposed to be protecting, then it's a joke and you can't be trusted with our money.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Paul the Bold, followed by Blair Beekman.
Paul the Bold. CEO actions. The most concerning issue today is the sole source contracts. There are 2 mentioned. The first seems reasonable. Seems a bit pricey, but not sure why Mrs. Deaton is the sole approver, since the list mentions that the CEO also approved. For this, justification is logical to continue representing the same client. On the Redwood law firm contract, the justification seems weak for a sole source, additional capacity to support mediation. I thought that was kind of set up to begin with. Is there in fact a reason that a $500,000 contract is needed? Perhaps the CEO can explain. Again, I am glad to see a list of closed session actions with a brief explanation, although I am a bit unsure what the actual results were. SANDAG is transferring $275,000 from the Bike, Pedestrian, and Neighborhood Safety Program. I hope SANDAG doesn't have to cut down on safety for the already dangerous and not used bikeways. On the time extensions, shame on the Jewish Family Services for putting off the GOG senior program just so it can use up funds it already has. But the Boulder Oaks bullfrogs must be happy that their extermination has been delayed. PAC actions. Looks like a few resolutions in support of actions taken by other people. Easy to ratify, but I wish there were more county-oriented actions. Meet minutes. Here comes the list of names like the Oscars, who did what on the consent agenda, which was consented to. Surprise! It's over in seconds, not minutes even.
Thank you very
But now
much.
it
Your
has
time has
some-
expired. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman, followed by Cesar Javier, and Cesar will be our final speaker.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman, thank you for seeing my hand. The ask for public comment came on kind of suddenly, which happens sometimes, and sometimes I'm a little slow to raise my hand. Thank you that you acknowledged my hand and take my public comment at this time. Thank you. I wanted to comment about the meeting minutes from last time, and you had a review and study of toll issues and the company, I think, involved with toll issues. And I just wanted to again remind the importance that in working on the toll issues, that the work that you do with the tech around the tolls themselves, and the same with at the Mexico border area. If you take the time to work on accountability practices with the tech involved, and work with the public on those issues, it creates a quality of life experience that's better for all of us. It just builds our better selves. And I just wanted to make that good reminder of what openness and accountability can do for ourselves. The same with, as you know, in my initial public comment, more than just dialogue and conversation. A dialogue and conversation on best practices is what really helps facilitate good conversation for everybody. And I think that's what's been going on in San Francisco right now. Good luck how we bring that back to the San Diego area, and that way we can address the future of ICE issues where they don't over-militarize in their practices. That's so key that we have to work on and make clear. Good luck in those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Cesar Javier. You can go ahead.
Hi, this is Cesar and Purita. My wife, like in the past minutes and past events in SANDAG cluster of thinkers, we found out that the frontliners, the core city elected officials, 11 of them, has been neglectful of the expectation of San Diegans, sick and dying, and dear God, even the dead are not cared. Homelessness, victims of crimes, victims of flood and fires. The 11 elected officials have not done clearly by words, by deeds, and even in their conscience. Let's look back. Councilor Lacaba, Councilor Rivera, the mayor, why are you so interested? Looks like permanent governing board member of the Air Pollution Control District. And why are you not there with SANDAG when this is the melting pot, the cluster of thinkers to save San Diegans who are suffering? My God, may you intervene because San Diegans are at the hands of these 11 core elected officials of the city in this region. God help us. God help Laqaba.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thanks very much. We're now on to board member comments on consent. I see none on the board. May I have a motion to approve consent, please? Motion by Chavez. May I have a second? Second by Chien. Please use your devices to vote.
Chair Huebner, we do also have to do a roll call vote since Deputy Mayor Melendez is joining us online this morning.
Okay, thank you.
For the City of Carlsbad,
Aye.
sorry, thank you very much. For the City of Chula Vista, Deputy Mayor Chavez.
Yes.
For the City of Coronado, Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Aguirre.
Yes.
For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Gasterland.
Yes.
For the City of El Cajon, Councilmember Goebel.
Yes.
For the City of Encinitas, Councilmember San Antonio.
Aye.
For the City of Escondido, Councilmember Fitzgerald.
Yes.
For the City of Imperial Beach, Councilmember McKay.
Yes.
For the City of La Mesa, Vice Mayor Cazares.
Yes.
For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Pro Tem Mendoza.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Thank you. The City of National City is absent. For the City of Oceanside, Mayor Sanchez.
Yes.
The City of Poway is absent. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair LaCava.
Yes.
For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
For the City of Santee, Second Vice Chair Minto.
Yes.
For the City of Solano Beach, Chair Huebner.
Yes.
And for the City of Vista, Deputy Mayor Melendez.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Do we also need to use these devices to vote? So County and Carlsbad,
please.
Imperial Beach, Poway, San Diego, please vote.
We'll reset this one and do it according to the roll call
Okay,
vote that we
thank you
did.
very
Sorry
much.
about that.
Okay, so now we're on to the iTalk annual report. Miriam, welcome.
Good morning. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Miriam Babaki. I'm the former chair of the iTalk for fiscal year 2025. And I'm pleased to share the brief overview of the committee's work over the past year through the annual report that's included in your packet today. So a little bit about iTalk, Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee. The role of responsibility of iTalk is listed here, and iTalk was established by voters in 2004 through the Transnet Extension Ordinance, and our purpose is to ensure accountability in the use of public funds by making sure Transnet expenditures comply with the ordinance and its intent. The iTalk's oversight role covers a wide range of responsibilities that are supported by a number of tools. The tools include what's listed here, such as an annual report, triennial performance audits, a number of ways that iTalk uses to fulfill its responsibility in terms of oversight. And today we are here for the annual report. The annual report that's in your packet right now has 7 sections, and it is shown in these slides what they comprise of. To keep it brief, I'll just go over the highlights of the annual report with you today. The report provides the progress on implementing the past performance audit recommendations. As of July 11, 2025, there were 110 TPM recommendations. Of those, about 80 are completed, 30 still are outstanding, and notably, all 2015 TPM recommendations are fully implemented. And this is actually a great milestone. And both SANDAG and iTalk are committed to completing the remaining recommendations, especially those that are classified as critical or high in priority. At our last meeting of September 2025, ITALK reviewed the remaining recommendations. We are working with staff to make sure that we are addressing the remaining ones. And I think as of that last meeting, we decided to also close out 2 more. But this is work in progress and something that both SANDAG and ITALK fully commit to accomplishing. Another core responsibility of ITALK is the oversight of Transnet expenditure through annual fiscal audit. In April, we presented the fiscal audit to the Transportation Committee, and this marked the 16th year that Transnet recipients were required to undergo a fiscal audit. Here are some of the findings from the 2024 fiscal audit. Don't mean to pick on anyone. This was in the audit. We'll go through the list, and we know that both SANDAG and ITALK staff, ITALK are committed to resolving these issues moving forward. Per the audit, City of Poway did not meet its maintenance of efforts requirements this year, but will make up the shortfall in the next fiscal year. City of Coronado and the County of San Diego were not in compliance with collecting revenues under the Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program, or RTCIP. Both now are in progress of collecting the outstanding revenues. City of Coronado did not commit or spend the previously collected RTCIP fees within 7 years. The city is working with SANDAG staff in the coming year to program these funds. MTS and NTCD did not meet their operator eligibility requirements for rail service. The board, acting as the Sandag County Regional Transportation Commission, approved a change to the calculation methodology to bring them into compliance. Both agencies will be working towards meeting the eligibility requirement next year. And Caltrans applied an incorrect indirect rate on several projects, which resulted in an overage of $77,785. And Caltrans has corrected the clerical error and is identifying a process improvement to prevent future occurrences. This report also highlights the role of Transnet in funding transportation improvements. This is an interesting slide. Transnet funds represent 20% of the fiscal year 2025 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or the RTIP. And these funds are supporting both the major corridor projects as well as local improvements. So as you can see, between fiscal year 2025 and 2029, $183 million is earmarked for improving the major corridors, and $836 million is planned for local street improvements. Meanwhile, about $130 million is planned for improving a regional transit system, $160 million towards operating bus rapid transit and rail. 13.5 will pay for bicycle, pedestrian, and neighborhood safety improvements. And more than $7 million is earmarked for the region's environmental mitigation program. Of the other Transnet project and program highlights are key Transnet projects, programs including Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, Transnet Major Corridors, Regional Bike Network, and Sandag's grant programs. So that's a really brief highlight. Again, the details are in the annual report. I invite you to visit that. And we are happy to be serving in this role as the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, committing to the board and the betterment of lives of the people in San Diego. I present to you the ITALK annual report, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Mariam. Thanks for your service on the ITALK. And we'll go first to public comment, and then we'll go to board discussion and questions.
Thank you. We have 5 public commenters. We'll start with Truth and then allegedly Audra.
The ITALK vision to ensure that the Transnet program, the half-cent sales tax, remains accountable to the public that funds it. that the public's tax dollars are carefully and wisely spent, that all voter mandates are carried out. So, what happened the last 20 years when this agency was anything but accountable? When our tax dollars were wasted on fake business lunches, when Mexican officials were brought here to discuss how they were going to build a binational association of governments with the United Nations, when HNTB and others got all the contracts without justification or documentation, when every project was an uphill bike lane, and when board members' calls for audits and even the auditor's own work was blocked. Where was ITALK to raise the red flags on the obvious corruption and illegal activities going on here? Why has the #1 goal for SANDAG taken over 2 years to come to some kind of decision on quorum? Can people not zoom in? Even Caltrans failed at getting the correct indirect cost rate proposal. I disagree with the audit results claiming that SANDAG appropriately allocated Transnet revenues. Percentages alone do not tell the full story of what was funded, how, and to who. The Transnet tax said expanding I-5, 8, 15, SR 52, 54, 56, 67, 76, 78, 94, 125, and 805. Last I checked, SANDAG was wasting our tax dollars on taking away lanes via HOV, managed toll, buses on shoulders, and bus-only lanes. That is not what everybody voted for, anybody voted for. The amended Transnet extension ordinance said all new projects shall accommodate pedestrians and bicycles except where costs would be excessively disproportionate to the need or probable use. That has never been abided by. The description of the Regional Transportation Improvement Program isn't even transparent. It needs to state that the one banking big on all of those failed SANDAG projects has been the Building Construction Trades Council, a subsidiary of the FAL-CIO, profiting off PLAs at the expense of the middle class to benefit their progressive political puppets. Another border crossing, empty bike lanes, and dangerous roundabouts over streets, potholes, and evacuation routes. Get your priorities straight.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Dan Summers.
Man, talk about fraud, waste, and abuse for decades and promises not kept. And yet you have this committee and stuff that's supposed to be, making sure that you guys are held accountable. But it's just kind of funny when we have committees like that. It'll be like, we're going to make recommendations, and then everyone just can be like, screw you, I'm not even going to listen to it. So then the BS just continues. And that's just the way the world works, right? I mean, why keep people accountable? But we all will be at the end, so don't forget that. But yeah, it's interesting to see, where did the $8.2 billion go? I would like to see like a breakdown of all of that, because I bet you it's a lot of racketeering, which we have already seen. And again, promises not kept. And then it's funny that people for like 40-year extensions, they were saying that the voters voted for, which I highly doubt. And then when you look at the world around us, you're like doing smart growth incentives when the transit is crap, the roads are crap. Where did this money go? If you're supposed to be improving things, it seems to be going towards a fast-paced downhill. It's crazy because the amount of money, we should have like gold streets with the amount of money that comes into San Diego, and there's nothing to show for it but a bunch of nonsense, putting people in danger, putting in bike lanes in places you shouldn't even be doing that, spending exorbitant amounts of money doing it, and nobody's going to be on them. But it doesn't matter, right? As long as you just make it really difficult for people to drive and not expand the freeways like you are supposed to, then, you're doing the United Nations bidding, and you're doing a very good job. As I said, this is like a mini United Nations, so good job on that. But it's just really sad to see that you guys want to bring forward committees like this and not really prove that you're doing what needs to be done. It just shows that this is further fraud, waste, and abuse, and it's just only going to continue. So good for you guys. I'm sure you'll get a raise for it, and we'll be paying for it.
Our next speaker will be Consuelo, followed by Paul the Bold. I'm so sorry. Next is Dan Summers, followed by Consuelo.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, SANDAG, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dan Summers, and I will be speaking in behalf of expanding State Route 67 to 4 lanes. A little bit about me. I've served on the Ramona Community Planning Group for 8 years. During that time, I served as the chair of the State Route 67 subcommittee. I'm currently on the Ramona School Board, and I've served on your San Diego County Fire Advisory Board. And this is my 28th appearance over these 8 years on behalf of State Route 67. I want to take a moment and publicly thank Mayor Rebecca Jones and Supervisor Joel Anderson for consistently supporting the people of Ramona and their effort to get Highway 67 expanded to 4 lanes. Thank you, Rebecca and Joel. The Ramona Community Planning Group has been lobbying, and every entity in Ramona has been lobbying Caltrans and SANDAG for nearly 9 years to widen 67 to 4 lanes and for safety and to facilitate emergency transportation. There's been a misconception. People believe that Ramona is asking that we widen 67 all the way to Lakeside. That has never been our ask. And besides, much of that has already been done. Ramona's ask is to widen 67 from Highland Valley Road to Scripps Poway Parkway, a distance of 7 miles, of which 1.3 miles is already 4 lanes. 1.3 miles is already 3 lanes, and 4.2 miles is 2 lanes. That creates the problem in evacuation.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Consuelo.
Thank you.
Followed by Paula Bold.
Okay, Consuelo here. So, yes, concerned tax-paying citizen who happens to comment publicly. I don't like public commenter. Sounds so gnarly. Anyways, okay, so here we are again, another report filled with numbers, goals, and slides that look good on paper but say absolutely nothing about what's actually happening. The so-called goal is inviting other cities to make presentations. They may be complete, but only 4 jurisdictions even showed up. And the new selection process for committee members is still in process. Yeah, talk about stalling. You say you care about accountability, equity, yet you still have no clear list of which audit recommendations were actually followed. Only that 73% were completed. Completed by whose standard? And 60% of the Transnet funds go to local street improvements, and yet 40% of those streets are still a mess. Fix the potholes. Let's see, we're spending $836 million, and somehow seniors, people with disabilities, and everyday residents are still left behind. So you guys talk about equity and sustainability, but most of this county can't even use your sustainable bike lanes. Stupid bike lanes, and seniors struggle just to navigate basic transportation. So yeah, total hypocrisy as usual. Yeah, and stop copying what works in other jurisdictions and start listening to the people of San Diego County. We're the ones living with the consequences of your decisions, and it's beyond evident at this point who you work for, and it's not the people. Done.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Paul the Bold, followed by Cesar Javier, and Cesar will be our final speaker on this item. Paul, you are so, oh, there we go.
Yeah, Paul Bold. All right, nice view in the opening slide. Can't see nearly as much. You're getting as much sunlight on the first floor. The goals say it all. That the goal of inviting other cities to make presentations on their local transportation is complete, but only 4 jurisdictions presented. Sounds like a bit of a scam. But the internal goal of a new selection process for members is still in process, and that's not good. Not sure if SANDAG cares about making sure that Transnet and taxpayer funds are spent wisely. At least SANDAG has completed 73% of the audit recommendations, although it would be nice to have a list and know which audit generated the recommendation. I see that 60% of Transnet funds go to local street improvement. Maybe that's why 40% of the streets are so bumpy. I think we should get more for 836 mil. Not much funding for safety or seniors. Pretty disappointing. The presentation slideshow lists a bunch of projects, but not the status. Are we actually getting what we paid for? Certainly not safety or affordable or reasonable housing or vac routes or streets you can be confident won't be blocked in some way, or stopping HNTB, maybe even firing them. I hear that 3 cities in MTS are not in compliance. I expect better. We'd get better results by putting homeless or low income on iTalk because they work with actual lousy streets and crappy housing. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Cesar Javier. You can go ahead.
Hi, this is Cesar Purita again. Thank you, SANDAG. I would like to declare that the inputs of Carlsbad on traffic, Coronado on nuclear power, that is at the city of Coronado. Thank you for the information. Again, another appreciation goes to Ma'am Melendez of Vista. Thank you for your community engagement on the celebration of Filipino workers with Larry Ilyong anniversary celebration as the jackpot at that day. Thank you. This is all about this iTalk. We call antivirus, antibiotic, as we delve on the planning, implementation of mobility and circulation. Sandag, thank you. We are learning a lot. And our participation, me and my wife, as community advocacy volunteers, we are gaining foothold, if only to say that we are protecting our democracy, our pledge to our flag. Secondly, I would like to emphasize that all the ITOC and other working forces of SANDAG, thank you. You are following the standard process. I just could only imagine what the impacts ought to be. Would it be good, better, best? Or probably we could construct more a mile-long concrete pavement? It's all about accountability. Thank you, Sandag.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Before we move to member comments, I'd like to call up Mr. Summers. Please, I have a question for you.
Thank you.
Could you please concisely tell the board what your requests are?
The Ramona Community Planning Group is requesting that mileage between Highland Valley Road in Ramona and Scripps Poway Parkway, a distance of 7 miles, be converted to 4 lanes. As it is now, we go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes, which causes bottlenecks in evacuation. Of that 7 miles, 1.3 is already 4 lanes. 1.3 is already 3 lanes. And 4.2 is 2 lanes. It is not that big a project. And the promise to complete that was made 38 years ago.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the clarity.
Appreciate the opportunity to clarify.
Sure. All right, let's go to member comments. We're going to start with Ms. Maxon.
Thank you. The Association of planning groups, which is representing that incorporated area, is really encouraged to see the inclusion of two rural highways, 67 and 94, on your major corridor project list, that those are highlighted. And as Mr. Summers spoke out, evacuation is the major concern. In the rural area, our east-west highways are our evacuation routes because the fire is driven by an easterly wind, obviously usually a Santa Ana wind. So the elimination of bottlenecks will prevent people being in a traffic jam and stuck during a firestorm. Caltrans has done a great job of cutting brush from those narrow corridors, but they're still narrow. And they really require a high level of urgency and attention because, as I've spoken here before, it's not a matter of if but when there will be a firestorm and there will be our residents and visitors stuck on those roads. So thank you for including these in your section on corridor projects, but also please include all of the east-west rural corridors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Jones.
Thank you so much, Chair. Okay, so on our numbers on our ridership for transit, I know our goal is that we get back to pre-pandemic and actually increase those numbers. So can we get an update on what those numbers are so that we can at least know where we're at, so we can just kind of know what our targets are? And then when it comes to the 67, I'm glad to hear that we're finally moving forward on that evacuation study. But I'm wondering if there's a nexus for all of our rural areas that need evacuation studies, if this could be something that we start, taking very seriously and looking at it. We've got a Valley Center, we've got all of these different, Fallbrook probably. I mean, there are so many different areas that we need to look at, I think. Our rural areas, even though they're not necessarily a corridor specifically, you have to use a corridor in most cases to get there. So it seems to me we should be looking at what would be the alternate route, for safety. And it's just, it's all about safety. So, and just talking about the Ramona, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but, I learned to drive on that. So that probably was more than 38 years ago, I hate to admit. No, probably right around there. Anyway, it would, God, it's been longer than that. Sorry, it's been over 40 years. I hate to admit it, but it's true. Anyway, if we could just, think about all the different corridors, all of the different evacuation studies, and get a status update, maybe, Mario, when you're in the next meeting, or maybe 2 meetings from now, since next week is too early, that we would have a full understanding of what things like that would actually cost and what we're currently working on. And then also if Caltrans is working on that. So that might be something that we, work together as, just because it's about basic safety. Anyway. All right, thank you.
I think, Mayor, yes, we can come with all your requests. And we'll be also coming through the year with multiple corridor updates, project updates. I think that the next subject, even so we won't dive into details, it's a very timely discussion that kind of falls in line with some of the requests and that have been expressed both by the public and board members. So yes to all your requests, but you're going to see how we're also strategically moving towards that in the next coming presentation.
Yeah, and, just kind of on that for a moment, there's all this discussion about adding new transit and doing all that when we have basic needs of evacuation for safety of folks. And I don't think, obviously there's only a certain amount of money that actually is out there to be used. However, I think, it'd be great if we could do everything, but I think basic safety should come first before anything else, and that's my humble opinion. But we know what's happened in other places where we haven't focused on that. Thanks.
And that will tie into our next conversation, because we're going to be looking sort of the reality check, and then how are we going to make these decisions, and what are the values that we're going to move forward with. So
absolutely, thanks.
Sure. Okay, Deputy Mayor Chavez.
Thank you for that important presentation, and I couldn't agree more with Mayor Jones. A couple of years ago, before I get into my questions, I know, we had a focus group at MTS to understand why we had, why the riderships weren't back. So I think it was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and we saw in that focus group where people would say, well, I can run, but my kids can't, right? That they didn't feel safe, that there weren't any public restrooms. So I would love to see from our representative of MTS here today to see if we can take this back to the board and ask them if they can update this focus group to see why ridership is not back. And that would help us get a better understanding of what we're doing wrong or what we're lacking in these important priorities in the riders. So that aside, I do have a question. What portion of the Palomar grade separations funding comes from Transnet compared to other state and federal sources?
Let me answer that one.
Okay.
Again, it's going to fall, the next presentation is going to be very timely. I don't have the numbers of what currently is funded. Palomar grade separation is not a fully funded project yet. There's been some funding for the environmental in other phases. I don't have that in front of me, but I think the answer is going to be that as that could be that will be a board discussion, one of those priority projects that we want to get fully funded, the next discussion is going to be, even so it may qualify for Transnet and it makes sense to use Transnet, it may also compete highly for federal funding or state funding. So part of the discussion is, it's going to be, let's really be strategic and nimble on trying to always put in somebody else's money into the projects and use our Transnet to leverage and move forward those projects, their priorities, like the Palomar grade separation. In my opinion, that project has to be fully funded. We have to have a full funding strategy, and this is where we need to be very strategic and nimble of using the local dollars as a carrot to attract others' monies. And if that doesn't pan out, then we go into a fallout plan that we increase the local funding. But it's always with the strategy of maximizing our local funds by attracting more state and federal funding. I can get you, as soon as this meeting is finished, the funding picture of the actual funding that's in the project right now for those preliminary phases and how much is Transnet on it.
I would really appreciate that's something that comes up often in our region, specifically with all the projects coming up and traffic safety. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. First Vice Chair LaCava.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the project-specific comments of my fellow board members, but I didn't want the moment to pass without thanking Miriam for the presentation and thank all the ITALC members, the volunteers who do the good work every day. I don't know what ITALC was doing 10, 15, 20 years ago, but I know what you're doing today, and I very much appreciate these reports and how critical it is for the board to better understand how money is being spent. I may have missed it. I'm glad to see that 85% of the recommendations have been completed. Do we have a timeline for the remainder of the recommendations? I don't know if that's a Mario question.
The goal is to put out the 2018 ones, wrap them up. A lot of them were, I was mentioning on the sidelines here to the chair, that a lot of them were requests to have metrics, but yet there's no tools for those metrics. So what we presented to ITALC was basically relying on measuring or metrics tools that the state, SANDAG, the cities, and the federal government has, so we can present a lot of those achievements or how we're getting there. Those were, I can't remember, Susan, do you remember how many are those that we're working on taking down? And then we're moving as soon as possible, trying to get all the other ones wrapped up.
So out of the 30 that are remaining, we have 19 that we intend to close out within the next 2 quarters. So we're working very hard with the subject matter experts on getting those closed out. Of the 2018 that remain, there's 9 remaining from the 2018 performance audit. We did have a conversation with staff presented what those remaining items were for 2018 to ITALK in the September meeting.
Right.
And we went through each of those items and what would be needed to be done to complete those items and close those out. So we're working with ITALK on closing those out immediately. But we do think that 19 will be completed within the next 2 quarters. And then the remaining, we're really hoping to close out as many as possible before July 1st of next year.
Okay, great. I asked that question in part to give thanks to Mario and the executive team and the pivot over the past couple of years and the good work of ITALK and the auditor in really changing the conversation here at SANDAG. The internal controls that have been implemented here is just such a sea change, and so thank you for that. So thank you again, Mary, for the presentation and your good work.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, which kind of highlights, the importance of timelines and keeping ourselves accountable to certain timelines. So that's definitely noted, and we'll be working with staff on that one. So thank you.
And Supervisor Aguirre.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up question, because I think I had a similar question regarding the grade separation at Palomar. Just to be clear, so you talked about the carrot in attracting other sources of funding, but obviously it's a competitive process that is not guaranteed. So does that mean if we don't get the funding, we'll still fully fund the project?
Not all the funding is competitive. There's a substantial amount of funding that comes to the region via formula, federal and state funds. So the idea through this exercise that we're beginning the conversation today is to present that cash flow strategy on how to fund the immediate phases to get the projects to fruition. So basically the idea is to have fully funded or have those projects in priority, but based on the formula funds that are coming out, sometimes it may make sense putting it in that specific project. Let's say it's priority number 1, but then there's other formula funding that may not be applicable, and we're saying don't hold off, put it on priority number 2. The idea is to deliver as soon as possible and fully funding that project together with other projects. Now, the item that we're bringing in is that it's flexible, meaning that funding comes, grants are awarded, formula funds may be changing. The new transportation surface bill is being discussed right now. So it's having that discussion of how nimble can we be to deliver those projects. Now, there is a component of safety that was brought up. And there are some projects together with that one, Palomar 67, that raised to the top as a safety concern that we need to also be nimble about it.
Okay, so as long as they don't get put to the back burner for any reason, I think that's important.
I don't think so.
Because it's a high priority for the South Bay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I also just want to take a moment to thank the members of ITALK for your service and hard work. I know it's not easy, so I appreciate your hard work. I think that, as I mentioned, the Palomar grade separation and projects like the Border to Bayshore Bikeway project are going to make South Bay easier to and safer to walk, to bike, to move through South County, and that's incredibly important for our district down in South County. So I look forward to seeing all the audit recommendations implemented. I see these and other projects as ways to make travel faster, safer, and cleaner for the residents of District 1. So I encourage us to continue pursuing those. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to address the issue of projects that had already been approved, already been fully funded, and yet by the time that the project's near complete, funding runs out. And I'm talking about the HOV lanes through Oceanside, the Coastal Rail Trail, and the Inland Rail Trail. I just want to make sure that we're not forgetting those. They were high priority projects, and I just want to remind that we're still trying to find ways of completing them, get them off our books, and as we move through other possible new projects, I don't want us to forget the projects that we fully supported before and thought they were fully funded. Thank you.
Be nice to do some ribbon cuttings, huh? Okay, Councilmember Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Circling back on some of the MTS numbers, as Vice Chair of MTS, I'm pleased to report we rank number 2 in the country, behind only the New York City bus service in recovery of pre-pandemic ridership at 95.1%. That ranks number 2, the major transit agencies, only to New York City bus. Nationally, it's about 85%. Again, we're at 95%. About 2 years ago, the board authorized an increase in public safety staff there, going from 40 to 80 code compliance inspectors. Crime on the trolley system is down 27% as a result, and the cost of those additional code inspectors has been recovered and then some. So it was a good cost move. It was a good safety perception move. People are feeling safer on the trolley and bus to ride it, and we are number 2 in the country for 95% of pre-pandemic ridership recovery.
Excellent. All right. I see nobody else on the board, so that concludes this discussion item. No action is necessary. Thank you again, Miriam.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the project funding presentation. And just a warning, this is going to be very detailed in the very beginning and throughout. So please feel free to take notes on what technical questions that you have, and then we'll go to questions after we have public comments, okay? Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Mario to open this up.
So the discussion that we just had is very timely, and this is going to feed into it. At the board retreat earlier this year, we had a discussion about future funding. And basically, like the chair said, it's a reality check. We have only so much dollars, a finite amount of resources, with a growing list of priorities or needs, or I would say increased cost prices also. It's not just sometimes additional projects or needs, it's also the costs keep incrementing in projects. So we're hoping to talk to you about today is how can we be more strategic about how we use the funding going forward. I call it in my team having a strategic cash flow discussion. Naomi is going to be talking with us about the economic scene and outlook of our region. Susan is going to be giving us an overview of funding resources, how they work, and sometimes the limitations that we have. I call them the different buckets of money or the colors of money, which is what I was referring there, Supervisor Aguirre, the different colors, the limitations that we have. And Clint is going to talk to us through some of the ideas that we're thinking through to help us get to construction faster. This is important because in the near future, there are going to be coming different funding actions to the board. And we need to have a big picture so those funding actions make sense. Some of them are mandated funding actions, like the State Transportation Improvement Program, what we call the STIP. It's coming for approval in November of this coming month. That's a mandated date that we need to put out there with all the projects that receive STIP dollars. Let it be local projects, state projects, regional projects, transit projects. So that's going to be coming out, but formulating this discussion and explaining it's important. Later next year, we'll be coming with the fiscal year 2027 program budget, both in March and May. So you'll be also seeing some numbers and discussions of projects. And then later next year, we'll be also bringing up the Regional Transportation Improvement Program plan that gets updated every 2 years, which is basically the cash flow strategy of how the region is spending those dollars. it is important that we go into this discussion so we have the right context and details to make these decisions. And so that's why we're here today, to start this conversation. Now, I want to make it clear, we're not choosing projects over other projects, or we're not eliminating projects. We're just being strategic. We're being strategic to take things to fruition. That's very important. We want to maximize the dollars that we get at the time that we get them, so we can be really nimble in delivering and also try to avoid those continuous cost increases that inflation gives us. Based on the feedback that we received today, we will come back to you on the next meeting to show you what this could look like for us an actual funding strategy. We will show you expected revenues for give or take the next 5 years, as well as proposals of best ways to leverage those funding. Those strategies are not cast in stone. And this is also what I want to highlight, is being that nimbleness of, based on what gets presented to us the day of programming, we can shift those priorities, but always understanding that we want to get to fully constructing something. That something can be an HOV lane, a grade separation, an emergency evacuation route, a transit station, a double tracking in the low sun, whatever it is, or funding a program that may be very important for the region. Now, I'm just going to give, as I always try, give a little bit historic aspects, and that shows that I'm a little bit older, have been here for a while, like some and others not. You know, when Transnet 2 was passed, the board made a decision. And the decision that was made is bonding up front to get many projects moving. That strategy worked well at that time. We're still paying for those bonds. You know, we're still paying for the I-15. We're still paying for some of the 805. We're still paying for some of the 5, and on and on and on. For the 905. So that was a strategy that worked at that time. And then the strategy, and also that strategy helped the San Diego region, together with military spending, biotech industry, and the additional spending in infrastructure, it helped this region to fare a little bit better than the rest of the nation in the 2008-2009 economic downturn. Now, the strategy changed, and in recent years, the focus has been on spreading the love, and it's putting a little bit of funding everywhere. So we have money in this phase, we have partially funded the design for this, we have partially funded the design for 67, and on and on and on. But if we continue in that track, we're not going to deliver that many things because everything is spread out. You know, we have spread out money for 3 different phases of the 78. 1578, 578 in the middle. But we still can't figure out how we're going to fully fund the 1578. So why do we have so much money spread out everywhere? We want to continue looking at the environmental studies and everything, but do we want more money that's needed just parked there, or do we want to redirect it within the corridor to get something done and constructed and help our economies? That is the cash flow that we're talking about. We, you know, in internal discussions, our senior director for administration was going, oh, are we moving money from this project to another? And our senior capital director said, no, we're just moving strategies within the corridors. And maybe we'll also chip something. I'm hearing 67. If we go the way that we're planning 67 on the books right now, and I'm not saying that Caltrans and SANDAG are planning that per se, but if we go with what's on the books right now, we're going to finish the environmental document in the future. And then we're going to have a billion-plus project. And if you go with the 12% rule for design, we need to garner 120 million or more just for the design of the corridor at the right-of-way costs. Why not pick those crucial locations and do standalone or independent utility projects within what was cleared and start parceling and getting there? When I became corridor director, and I'll stop pretty soon, of the South Bay corridor, a joint position that SANDAG and Caltrans had, and the flag project was to deliver Old Time Mesa East. When I got that position in 2008, I opened the books, and there was zero funding for the project. It had future funding 5 years in the future for if you could get to construction, but we did not have, not even for the environmental document, we had $0. So I scratched my head and I came to talk to the CEO here at SANDAG. I said, hey, Mr. Gallegos, how the hell we're going to deliver this? He says, well, figure it out. That's why we hired you as a corridor director. And the strategy we did there is we actually went and audited all the other border projects. And we went and found savings on a funding source that was called the Coordinated Border Infrastructure Project. And we were able to finance the environmental document. And then we started being stalkers and we followed different people like Komi Ajitso that the chair just met. And we were able to keep getting money slowly. But we did independent utility portions. The Old Time Mesa East project has been already had probably 4 or 5 different construction projects fully funded and executed. Slowly we were getting there. That's kind of the principle we're talking. Let's get momentum, let's get things rolling, let's get things that can be done. Let's regain the trust of the public, and as a staff, regain the trust of the board to be able to have those groundbreakings on those ribbon cuttings. So that's what the team is going to be talking to you about, and I'll stop there. But the idea is to begin the conversation of flexibility, strategic, and being nimble. Team, take it away.
Madam Chair, could I add a comment here?
Yes.
Thank you. I also propose that we also include, because it was not at the time of our retreat, SB 79 considerations, because we still don't have mapping. We don't know what the triggers might be that would probably end up changing policies drastically and be extremely negatively impactful. So it probably might affect priorities, because I don't, I'm hoping that will change sometime later, or as we're planning on working to make sure that changes later. But I especially for our city, because the city of San Diego, city of Oceanside, city of Vista have already been named as the targets. And I definitely want to make sure that we don't trigger anything via regional planning and where the monies are going to go, and priority-wise, that would make things so much worse for our cities, Solana Beach, whatever, that it just wouldn't be something that we could, I would hope that we would not be moving forward on. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, let's move forward with our staff presentation. And remember, take notes if you have questions.
Thank you. Before we get started, Naomi, I want really quick on the Palomar Grade Separation Crossing. We have about $5.7 million in local Transnet dollars, and there's $29 million in federal dollars. It's fully funding the environmental phase, funds the right-of-way, and we're partially funded for design. So it's about 20% local, 80% federal. And we expect to complete the environmental document this winter and move into the design phase.
Naomi, it's all yours.
Great. Good morning, Naomi Young, Principal Economist at SANDAG. And I just want to start with saying Mario's words about adapting our funding strategies to the economic environment resonates quite a lot when I think about We had a strategy that built off of 10 years of steady expansionary growth, where the ability to spread funds broadly was a fairly safe strategy because we could anticipate growth over and over again. That is not the environment we're in. Without a doubt, uncertainty and volatility are key words that are used to describe today's economic environment. And there's good reason for it. If you look back, we've been talking about uncertainty for 5 years now. And at that point, I'm starting to think that it's more of a condition or a fundamental to how we look. And in an environment of uncertainty, strategy becomes really important, as does nimbleness. So our view of the economy and how economic policy and data is being updated and what headwinds or tailwinds are flowing has been constantly shifting throughout the year. In this kind of environment, understanding current conditions, how they translate to where we're headed, not just this year, but longer term, becomes even more critical for the agency and how it plans to deploy resources to best serve the region. I'm going to focus our time on sharing how we're interpreting economic indicators and tracking what they signal, not just at the national front, but here in the local economy. It goes without saying that this year has tracked in a surprising manner. We went into the year with a lot of positive traction, and it felt like the economy was stabilizing. We were looking at positive but slowing growth, and the general consensus that the Fed had navigated the soft landing. And what we've really been experiencing is not just uncertainty, which is, like I said, been around for the last 5 years, but greater volatility. And this volatility makes it harder to predict or see trend. With the data available, what we know is that GDP growth has been negative and positive in the first half of this year, which means that for the third quarter and fourth quarter, without the data releases at the federal level, it's difficult to know what really is going to materialize. Inflation looks like it's creeping up, and the labor market data points to softening. Now that's the national picture. At the local level, data becomes even more piecemeal, and we can track inflation and jobs, but economic growth is harder. Heading into 25, San Diego's economy appeared stable, but our growth trailed the nation. Consumer spending, which is the engine of our economy, eased, and in 2024, it appeared stable. Price pressure was being walked back with last year's gains, and the labor market had softened significantly in 24, which was a yellow flag for us because the region was adding jobs, but that job growth was slow and uneven. Collectively, this all points to a flat economy, and it brings us to the key question about how resilient is our economy nationally and locally to the ongoing uncertainty and volatility that we're experiencing. This chart shows GDP growth in California and San Diego. The state GDP is released quarterly, while county GDP is available only annually and typically with a 2-year lag. So what I want to draw your attention to is what happened in the last 2 years. 23 was a pretty good year. Our GDP in San Diego was about 1.4%. But the data for 24 is pointing to things not gaining momentum, and I suspect that we've had increased weakness in manufacturing and professional services, 2 key sectors for our region, while healthcare, tourism, and entertainment have been pretty robust. For reference, California ended 2024 growing at 3.2%, and the first half of this year it's averaging around 3.2%. But most of that growth in the last year and the first half of this year is not coming from Southern California. Inflation in the labor market is going to continue to be a big part of the story for the rest of this year and next year. This chart shows U.S. inflation. The blue line is 2022 when inflation was at its peak. The orange line is the start of 2024, which is the great success story where it came down below 3% and the Fed started to cut rates. And then you can see the green bars is where it's been so far this year. Of note, Bureau of Labor Statistics just released CPI for this month, well, for last month, and the U.S. inflation came in at about 3%. So it's inching up, but again, it's with just a few data points, it's difficult to say where that's really headed. Now in San Diego, we saw a little bit of a different story. The blue line again is where inflation peaked in 2022. The orange line is where we were last year, and so you can see it was coming down, much like what we saw in the U.S., but the green bars are where inflation in San Diego is tracking this year. So you can see that the inflation that's hitting our region is tracking above last year, so it's reasonable to expect that we're going to continue to feel stronger price pressure than other parts around the U.S. And the number that was just released this morning was 3.9%, which is higher than last year. So we're not seeing a walk back and the potential for 25 ending the year with higher inflation than what we experienced last year. Now, I'd be remiss to not talk about cost trends in construction, especially as we think about how economic conditions directly impact SANDAG's plan for infrastructure delivery. At SANDAG, we tend to focus on two construction cost indices. One is PPI, which on the chart on the left is in orange, and the other is CCI, which is the blue line. PPI is a measure of government's demand for construction. It's a pretty broad measure compared to CCI. The point to these two is to say that when we measure construction costs, you can see that they don't always move together in the two indices. And so this is part of where I'm talking about uncertainty, as well as some of the volatility, because you can see the timing of the movements. Now, we're all thinking about construction cost exposure to tariffs. And so what you can see is in 2018, Trump administration introduced a first round of tariff increases, and you can see that construction costs started to rise quite strongly. In 2019, it was rolled back, specifically at least for Mexico and Canada, and you can see how the cost started to come down. 2025, we're expecting to see a similar pattern with the tariffs being imposed. The question is when. If you want to, and when we think about how that flows through our projects, it starts to become an important issue is the composition of the materials and how each material is impacted by tariffs. So if you look at the chart on the right, you can see steel and concrete. Steel is a product that typically, or an input that's imported, and so you can see in 2025, the rate of the price increase was increasing quite strongly. Concrete, on the other hand, tends to be produced in the United States, and so you can see that the growth rate in the cost escalation is much slower. So what this means is that when you think about the two ways that we measure construction costs, and we think about tariffs, that it's not a clear signal how that works through. But it is one that requires us to be quite cautious. Okay. So I've talked a little bit about price pressures in the economy. The other thing that we're looking quite closely at is job growth. And that's partially because that is a key measure for the Federal Reserve in thinking about whether or not to cut rates, as well as what it's the closest measure we have to real-time conditions in the San Diego region. And so last year we had very little job growth, and that doesn't necessarily give me pause. What I am focused on is where do we see job gains and losses and what's driving that. So this chart shows you several sectors that are responsible for 70% of the jobs in our region. 4 sectors, government, healthcare, leisure, and hospitality are responsible for 45% of the jobs, and they all grew especially in healthcare. What I find interesting is that leisure and hospitality also expanded last year and continues to expand through this year. What I am concerned about are the sectors that are experiencing job loss, and this has been a 2-year trend at this point. Manufacturing and professional services have been on a downward trend. Their job losses are not big, but they are notable, especially because they are sectors that are directly exposed to macroeconomic headwinds from federal and international arenas. Retail this year is actually flipped, and it's now a sector that's losing jobs. This does give me pause because it's a key indicator for thinking about GDP, which is a driver for our economy, and it's a pulse on consumer spending, which has implications for not just economic growth, but also our tax revenue. So I've walked through what we know about the economy at the end of the summer before the federal data feed stopped, and it underscores why our outlook is measured. The region's growth slowed last year, leaving limited room to accommodate drags on our local economy. And this year, we're finding the region in a unique environment. We don't typically see headwinds sync up, but this year, the economic diversity of our economy means that we may be more rather than less exposed to these headwinds. We see hints of trends being disrupted and more volatility being interjected, like which sectors are driving job growth, how tariffs are working their way through our economy, and the differences in national versus local growth. This creates a more urgent need to be aware of the downside risk of being off on funding growth expectations, to have more sensitivity to the planning horizons as we think about our future revenue, and then also the importance of continuously assessing if expectations are actually being realized. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Naomi. So one of the key takeaways from Naomi's presentation is that the regional economic outlook remains uncertain. So Naomi provided the 30,000-foot view of the broader local, state, and federal challenges shaping that outlook. I'd like to bring that perspective down to the ground level, to how these economic and policy dynamics affect SANDAG and our regional partners' ability to plan, deliver, operate projects and services. To start with some context, our current annual budget includes funding from 102 different sources, a mix that reflects just how complex and layered our funding environment really is. That includes 42 federal, 27 state, and 34 local funding sources, all of which contribute to the projects and programs we deliver across the region. In terms of revenue share, state and federal sources play a major role. Together, they make up nearly 3/4 of our total revenue, with state funding at 42% and federal at 31%. So relying on a variety of sources is a strength. It allows us to maintain some level of contingency and stability when there's economic uncertainty or policy shifts at the federal or state level. But with that diversity comes complexity. Each of these 102 sources comes with its own set of guidelines, eligible uses, timelines, and compliance requirements. Managing them takes careful coordination, expertise, and constant attention to changing rules and criteria. So this slide illustrates that while having a broad mix of funding sources is both necessary and beneficial, it also means that we must be highly disciplined and strategic to manage that complexity. On the prior slide, we saw that Transnet only makes up 15% of the revenue that SANDAG is using in fiscal year 26 to deliver on our programs and projects. It is a very important source of funding, which allows the region to set its own priorities and projects, and it is used as leverage for outside funds. I've included this slide just as an example. I think most of you have seen this slide before. It was presented at our retreat, and we've talked numerous times regarding the funding gap between expected expenses for the projects that are in our Transnet Major Corridor program and the revenue and estimated revenue that's coming in for those projects. So what you can see here is the gap between project costs, which are the blue lines, and the anticipated revenue, which are the pink lines. So what happens when the project needs exceed the available funding? That's why prioritization and strategic considerations are required for program implementation. SANDAG receives funding from two primary sources, formula-based and competitive funding. So our formula is allocated to us based on set criteria, most commonly population size, the number of road miles, or other measurable factors. These funds are relatively predictable and provide a foundation for our long-term planning. On the other hand, competitive funding is awarded based on the strength of individual project proposals. These opportunities are highly sought after and require us to demonstrate that our projects offer strong benefits, align with regional, state, or federal priorities, and score well against other applicants using a formal rubric. So while the formula funding offers consistency, it often isn't sufficient to fully meet our regional transportation and infrastructure needs. That's why competing successfully for grants is critical to advancing key projects. However, the challenge is that competitive funds are uncertain, highly variable year over year, and require significant time and resources to pursue without the guarantee of an award. So navigating this mix of funding types requires a strategic approach to maximize every dollar. And like we've talked about, securing funding is a big win. It's important to understand that funding, especially from those external sources like state and federal grants, often comes with strings attached. So project eligibility, funds can only be used for certain types of projects. You can't necessarily spend funds that are for bike projects on highway projects or vice versa. If a project doesn't meet criteria set by the funder, the cost may not be reimbursed. Some funds can only be spent on certain phases, such as planning or design or construction. And many grants require a local match. That's where Transnet comes in for us. We are very lucky that we have that matching so that we can go after these outside grants. And we are seeing a trend towards greater co-funding requirements in those funding opportunities from the state and the federal government. There's often timeline restrictions. If funds aren't used within an allowed window, we may lose access to them. And then we have to get the authorization requirements. So typically, spending must be pre-approved. Any expenses incurred before that formal authorization are not eligible. So lots of requirements. This slide is meant to show all of those requirements don't just happen at the project level, it's often at the phase level as well. These are all the different phases that we look at for funding. Lots of opportunities for board participation, but these are all the different phases that we are looking at different funds. The different types of activities occur within these phases. And our goal is to have projects at every phase so that we can create a shelf or pipeline of projects to maximize our funding opportunities.
I think, can we go back to the prior slide? I think this is super important to highlight, the board participation on each phase. You decide when we come for the budget itself or budget amendments, you decide when to fully fund a phase. But it doesn't make sense to put money in a construction phase when you're in the environmental phase, because you have a boatload of other things in between with a lot of money commitments. So I think this is kind of the bulk of that strategy, right? Being strategic of knowing we want to get to the finish line, but let's be strategic on each of those phases so we get them concluded and we keep moving. We keep moving. That's the whole idea, the momentum, getting momentum. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mara. So connecting project needs and phasing with available funding is like solving a complex puzzle. Each piece has to fit right to move the project forward. So we start by looking closely at the project itself. What are the needs and the timing requirements? Does the project need funding immediately, or is the need 5 years out? Understanding the timing helps us to plan when to secure funds and from which sources. Next, we determine the phase. Once we know the phase, we identify which types of funding qualify. For Transnet, for example, the project has to be in the ordinance. For state funds, the project must be in alignment with program criteria. We look at matching requirements, and then after we identify the right funding, we have to move into securing it. And once the funds are awarded, we complete the required budget and programming actions for board approval. So those actions also come back to you. The budget amendment adds the funding to the agency's annual program budget, giving us the authority to spend the funds. And an RTIP amendment updates the region's official transportation project list to reflect changes and ensuring funding eligibility. Which brings me to the current policy challenge we're facing today, the air conformity lockdown, which Mario mentioned earlier. And so this is something also I just wanted to bring up. One of the things that we're managing is the ability to do RTIP amendments in this air conformity lockdown. There may be some restrictions on approving new funding for transportation projects, which may be coming up. So that also is another policy challenge that we're facing. So next, I'll turn it back to Clint, who will describe how the region's funding picture fits in with other strategic considerations.
Thank you. So good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board. My name is Clint Peace. I'm the Senior Director of the Capital Program. And today I'm excited to kind of talk through some of the strategies we've been discussing, we've been thinking about, and how we deliver these projects economically. So there are three things that we're focusing on when we think about this. How can we deliver on our commitments now? How can we balance that portfolio? And how can we set our projects up for those future funding opportunities? So we're looking at a strategy that provides the greatest value and impact. That is not an either or approach, but a both and solution that aligns with your core policies. So as Naomi just discussed, there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy right now. We need to find ways to minimize that risk while we maximize the opportunities and help the local economy. Some of you may recall beginning this discussion at the board retreat. There, Robin talked about how we balance policy, funding, and delivery constraints to provide the best value or the greatest impact. We also discussed the importance of that balanced portfolio. When we mention a balanced portfolio, we're kind of talking about three things. One is working on a range of projects throughout those stages that Susan mentioned, balancing those near-term solutions with our long-term priorities, and also balancing that portfolio lends itself to taking advantage of the funding opportunities as they come up. So Susan provided an overview of the project phasing and the complexity of the transportation funding, but funding is just one criteria that should be considered. As we discussed at the retreat, there are three key considerations with the policy, delivery, and funding. These three pillars form the framework for ensuring that our projects meet the strategic goals, are actually feasible to implement, and are financially viable. These are some of the strategies we're thinking through and would like to get your feedback on today. So when we talk about policy, we're talking about kind of the broad sense of the word, including priorities, state priorities, federal directives. So some examples, like at a local level, we talked a lot about safety today, the transit ordinance, multimodal, public and partner input. At the state level, we have priorities of safety, VMT reduction, multimodal, GHG. At the federal level, we've gotten recent new priorities, right, that talk about increased use of technology, right, access to jobs, healthcare, commercial activity, co-funding opportunities, P3 opportunities, and an overall reduction on the dependence of future maintenance funds, so projects that are revenue generating. Understanding these different policy priorities is critical so that we can align the right project with the various grants to maximize those funding opportunities. When we talk about funding, funding is about all the strings Susan talked about, but it also includes considerations like maximizing those flexible funds by making reasonable assumptions on future opportunities, and also sizing and packaging projects to maximize those funding opportunities. Delivery is about where the projects are in that life cycle that was showed, but strategic delivery is understanding the project readiness, making sure that those right projects are delivered at the right time, and about balancing the short-term and long-term needs while ensuring that we're a resource-balanced workload. Wrong button. So we talk about an overall balanced approach. These are the four pillars that we're talking about today. We know in life, everything's a balance, right? Whether looking at buying a new car, decisions on a house remodel, where to go on vacation, or saving for college. As we think about the funding strategy, we're thinking about how to balance that portfolio across four focus areas: timing, systems approach, leveraging funds, and phasing. Again, not an either or, but a both and. Thinking of these as sliding scales, where do we want to fall in each of these areas to maximize the opportunities? So timing, do we focus on the long-term investments or do we deliver projects now? System focus, do we focus all the funding completing whole quarter systems or do we ensure that we have that sub-regional spread? Leveraging our flexible funds, I think this is an important topic. Traditionally, at SAM, we kind of had a 90-10 approach. That's talking about using 90% of our flexible funds, of CMAQ, RSTP, Transnet, on our transit ordinance projects, right? It makes a lot of sense. Use those funds to leverage those projects. However, we still want to focus on those. It's not always the most strategic financing approach, right? And that's because a lot of our ordinance projects compete extremely well for those federal grant opportunities, for those state opportunities. So we want to maybe, when we're successful in getting those grants, it gives us some more of that flexibility to put those flexible funds on other projects. So then the last one, emphasis. Should we emphasize to fully fund large mega projects or do we deliver in a more phased approach that Mario talked about? So thinking about the I-15 managed lanes, by scaling or phasing mega projects as an opportunity to reduce the delivery risk. It gets worked into construction sooner and it provides more flexible funding for other priorities. So these are the various factors we are considering when trying to figure out how to best deliver our projects and at any given time, and we can lean more one way or the other on each of these pillars. What we'd like to better understand from you today is where would you fall on the spectrum within these pillars? This will allow us to bring you a strategy that shows how we apply this to actual funding and projects. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Mario.
Thank you. So like we mentioned, today's a conversation of hearing based on these pillars, and we already heard it even from the prior presentation, some of where you land in priorities, right? There were specific projects discussed, but there's also strategy-wise, right? So we're all ears. We're all ears.
Thank you. I'm just going to start a little comment before we go to public comments and then to the board. This is pretty overwhelming, and it's very complicated, and it's hard even almost to comment on it in a way because it is so complicated. But we're the ones with the answers to these questions that we're going to be asking today. So, and we don't have to come up with all of this brilliance right away today, but we know that funding sources are really, really complicated. We know that the economy is uncertain, and we know that this region has a lot of needs. And so it's up to us to kind of figure this out. While we're a self-help county with Transnet, it's not a lot, and we know that there's a gap. And having been on the board for a really long time, I'll just inform you that there's always been a gap. There's always been the needs versus what we're going to have. So it's not a new thing that there's a gap. It's not a wonderful thing, but it's just the reality. And that's where we need to have a strategy. That's where we need to kind of be looking at the funding sources and relying on staff with their expertise to giving us the information that we need. There's going to be questions that I'd like to hear from you today. Things like, how are we going to distribute these? Are we going to go through regional corridors, or are we going to distribute them, through major corridors, or are we going to distribute money through the subregions? What factors are we going to use, what values are we going to use to guide our decisions, knowing the restrictions and the strings on all of our funding sources? And how should we balance investing projects that deliver immediate benefits, some ribbon cuttings, versus setting those other ones up on a bench for the future? So there's a lot of information that maybe that provoked that you could share with us after we hear from the public on where you land on some of those things, so we can begin to formulate. Again, the whole theme of this year has been reality check. Let's work within our means and make sure that we're focusing the means that we do have on the real needs of this region. So with that, I'll ask Francesca to call the public.
Thank you, Chair. We have 6 members of the public who'd like to speak. We'll start with Truth and then go to allegedly Audra.
I remember one time in La Mesa, I said, here's what government balance looks like. You go like this, bam, just drops. When imports are up, it means American manufacturing and jobs are down. SANDAG should look at finding a way to increase exports. One can only hope that the renegotiation of the USMCA will stop allowing multinational corporations relying on slave labor in Mexico to avoid 82% of tariffs they should be paying this country. If construction costs are going down, inflation is slowing, labor is less constrained, and interest rates are coming down, does that mean Trump is doing something right? How can SANDAG claim contradictory economic uncertainty under a healthy GDP growth? Maybe if this board flipped away from pro-union, you wouldn't need to talk about a funding strategy. Solutions: eliminate unnecessary expenses such as catering for meetings with a projected end time. Eliminate microtransit that competes with public transit yet costs 5 times the price. Eliminate pointless retreats outside of this building. Eliminate free ride day, which loses money and does not encourage ridership. Force MTS and NCTD to enforce a 100% paid ridership so their systems cost less and are safer, unlike Goebel's recurring lies. In the costly YOP program for unaccompanied minors. No more telling MTS to implement 60-foot empty accordion buses they have no money to operate. Eliminate the conflict of interest project labor agreement with the Building Construction Trades Council to save the county billions. No more building projects outside of SANDAG's jurisdiction, such as border crossings, which are a federal responsibility. OME could have funded safety for the 67. Tax bike lanes, tax EVs, tax all border crossings. All of these people are skirting their fair share while reaping huge rewards. Most bicyclists are riding for fun, not for transportation, yet they're taking roads away. EV owners are the wealthy who are not paying gas taxes, putting our neighborhoods at risk of lithium fires, and destroying our roads with their heavy batteries. And entering our country is a privilege, not a right. Taxing the highways and adding new sales taxes hurts the middle class who keep government running. No more political projects for ribbon cuttings. Get used to it. And of course, lock up the crazies at the state level.
Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Paul the Bold.
I'm just wondering if you guys look around and you're like proud of the work you guys do. If you're like, San Diego is classy, it is looking good, because it's disturbing to see how much money. All I hear is just money, money, money going around, and you do things based off of fraud. So, I mean, it's just like a bunch of racketeering that's going on. How are we going to get this money, and then what do we have to show for it? People getting new houses, like being richer, being able to get a new car, right? Oh, well, there's people on the street suffering. It's just rather ridiculous. But your whole CEQA stuff that you use, it's like, you know, projects take forever. I can't even believe this was implemented in 1970. Oh my gosh, and how much has the environment gotten worse since then? So it's obviously working, right? It's good to delay projects, make sure that people get into lawsuits so they can just, you know, put people's or money in people's pockets because they're delaying a project or whatever is happening. But it literally impedes your ability to do anything. And the environment isn't getting better because you're not addressing the actual issues that are causing that. And the people that bring this forward, like Ronald Reagan, was all about fossil fuels as well. So it's like, this, you know, double speak of like, we want to do these things, and we see all this money coming by, and you're talking about buckets of money. I mean, you guys literally treat it like it's monopoly money, and people aren't suffering just trying to pay you guys more because you tax us more, so you can say that you're going to provide something that you don't. It'll be interesting if one day we actually see the fruits of your labor are providing stuff for the people as opposed to making things worse day by day by day. It is disturbing the fact that you guys sit here and you know, sit at this table and talk about money the way that you do, and you really don't care, because it would show if you did. You know, it wouldn't smell like piss and shit outside, and, you know, get into lawsuits like the city of San Diego because people are hurting themselves because the infrastructure is not
Your
up
time has expired. Our next speaker is Paul the Bold, followed by Andrea Ebbing.
Bold. Too bad that this slideshow does not really deal with financing in the current climate, where the state feds in San Diego City and County have large deficits, just that it is unstable. While the feds are clawing back more and more funds that they already approved, and the county gets financially squeezed. The first priority should always be safety. Build up things like evacuation routes, especially on projects which were promised years ago. Like the long delayed downtown stopover or the incomplete safety improvements on SR 67. But also, some of the HOV lanes I've seen are pretty narrow, and some narrow suddenly, hence they're more dangerous than they should be. And then after that, after safety, the next priority should be doing what was promised years ago. SANDAG has a bad track record on following through on promises. You keep bringing up the trust issue. Unreasonably delayed projects, mixed messages, safety, and also SANDAG's ramrodding ideas down our throats are four issues which are still, after all these years, contributing to distrust. After how many years has this gone on? You know, I really hope you don't think it's fixed, because it's not. Do not do what silly Sacramento.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Andrea Ebbing, followed by Consuelo.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Ebbing, and the contract approval process, everybody should just be aware that I did speak to the State Controller's Office, Malaya Cohen's office, recently, because I found an audit of the San Diego District Attorney's use of grants and funds and state funding. which showed that she had submitted $3.4 million of unsupported, undocumented, fraudulent billing for the child abduction recovery program. She wasn't recovering children over this time period that were abducted and taken across the country like mine. She was being a fraud and sending in false reports, of which they found $0 of the 3.4 million she sent over was allowable. And that's called fraud. So what I did is I spoke to their office and I just so that we're not in a situation where we're trying to kind of clean up after the fact or hide things or whatever. I just want everyone to know that we had an at-length conversation about what's taking place in San Diego. And I can assure you, there are eyes watching. Everyone is watching how the money is being spent. And the feds in San Diego can rest assured that the feds in Washington are watching them. Because we can't have a system in which our district attorney, who's married to the federal judge, whose sister is the city attorney, is overseeing everything in San Diego. That's just not reality. When the federal government works for Dana Sabrow, who's Summer Stephan's husband, that doesn't really work because they're not really doing their jobs. The slap on the wrist sentences that people are getting that are involved with them, like the recovery, addiction, homeless industry, they're covered, right? They can deal opioids. There can be multiple fatalities with no investigations. People have had their medical license revoked 6 times, can get it back and work again. No, everyone's watching. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Consuelo. You can go ahead. Consuelo, I can see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next person, and then I'll come back. So we'll go to Cesar Javier next. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Sandag. If you could hear me, thank you. Value analysis. In short, we have less money. We miss something. Funding is not all about money. Time, labor, services, materials. We are missing one important thing, trust, which is under the umbrella of justice for rich and the poor. Second is priority. What are our priority really? Is this not a time also to prepare the rural areas for a healthy, safe circulation, transportation? Public safety. We look just very easy on this. Preparedness. Remember, we can never defeat nature, but rather protect us. Procurement. We have learned from many presentations. We like single procurement. Could we not explore competitive procurement? How could we do good, better, best when we are in crisis? Pollution, air, water, land, coastal, sea, water, death, sickness, dying, seniors and children, vulnerable people. Public health declares crisis. What about us, Sandag? Where are we? I would like you to give an example. The city of San Diego region. Failure is not on economic downturn, but failure in leadership governance. It is governed in contradiction. They love animals in the zoo rather than loving our homeless San Diegans, victims of Tijuana Valley River. What have you done, Mayor? Lacaba, Rivera, Campbell.
Thank you. Your time has expired. I'm going to go ahead and try Consuelo again. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to say regarding the previous concerned citizens that, you know, it's a great thought. Gosh, wouldn't that be great if government, investigating government, something truly great, you know, came out of it? But nope, that's not the case. It's the system. It's entirely the system. It's confusing, Lisa. Yes, very confusing, purposely confusing for the average person to tune out and not really care anymore of what is happening within their county. All purposeful, all by design. It's just unfortunate that this agency is just, gosh, I mean, we've said it for so many years now. You guys, at least the ones who have been there forever and have seen the corruption and has been a part of the corruption, you know better, and you know where we're coming from, our frustration, and it's, you know, as the previous Andrea Ebbing mentioned, you know, it's I don't really care about the government investigating the government because, gosh, ain't shit going to happen regarding that. But I am aware, and I'm so happy that people are in fact fed up and waking up and starting to just realize nothing is adding up. Nothing you guys do is making their lives better. And all you guys do is talk. And honestly, it's just, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Very good. Okay, we're on to member comments. Mayor Jones.
Thank you so much, Chair. So we only have a finite amount of funding. We all know this. I mean, this really clears that all up. And thank you for the presentation. You know, when we think about, just some thoughts on it, when we think about, you know, what our needs are, they're very diverse throughout the county. I mean, you have the rural areas, you have the more densely populated areas. And we're really right now in a time of building more credibility because we did have issues in the past. I think we're moving forward in that. But we, you know, have these needs that continue to grow, and it seems like the money is actually sort of going the other way, unfortunately. So, you know, in the slide where on page 45, it talks about what that difference is, you know, and then also what our approach needs to be. I think we need to also think about the promises and the priorities of what we've already told people we would have based on Transnet, what they voted for, and how important, you know, we have the urgent needs of safety. You know, safety is a big part of this, but also the movement in goods throughout the county. And then also we need to prioritize transit that's effective, that actually is filled up, has people using it, and isn't just an empty bus or train. And I'm not saying all trains are empty. I'm not saying all buses are empty. Not all trolleys are empty. I'm not saying it like that. I'm saying we need to think about, and when we've kind of been talking about our priorities, what the new plan's going to be, a lot of it is based on microtransit, because that's what actually moves people around in the cities. But we need to have numbers, I think, that, you know, and I brought this up earlier, numbers so we kind of know where we're at, because I don't want to spend any more money on things that are moving people around or not moving people around that are, you know, just sitting there empty. We want to spend our money in the best way possible, but we can't do that if we don't have ridership numbers. So even I know Vista had their latest, I guess Katie's on the Zoom. I think that Vista launched their NCTD Plus. I know that our numbers, I haven't actually seen an update on those. I know that we're going to be getting those. But it would be good to know, is microtransit working? And I know that Oceanside has something, that Go Oceanside. I think it's, I don't know what it's called. Maybe it's like Go Side. I knew it was something like that. I was pretty close. Anyway, you know, having those numbers as to what actually is effective. And I know we all want to make these good decisions, but I think these are things to help inform us better. And maybe we have just a meeting on where we're at, or, you know, just an agenda item on where we're at, what's working, what's not working, and so we can really focus, and then find out what Caltrans is doing separately, find out, kind of, and maybe it's not separately, but, also on their end. But it'd be good to find out where we're at and have like an overreaching, or overarching, I guess it would be. Gosh, I might not have had enough coffee this morning. Anyway, just as everything that we're looking at moving forward, so we can make a very, very informed decision, because there are things that aren't going to be funded. And like the Coronado Tunnel, we promised that to people. Is there something we can do to actually get them across faster with not trolleys, but with more lane, or not more lanes, but open lanes in different ways on the bridge? Is there a way to use, I don't know, is there something else that would work? So anyway, just rethinking how can we provide what we actually promise to folks in a way that makes sense.
So we're hearing prioritize based on promises made on the Transnet ordinance, safety projects,
yep.
goods movement, need to have more data for effective transit decisions.
Yes.
That's what we're hearing. So
Sorry it's so much.
that's fair. No, that's
again,
fair.
I maybe haven't had enough coffee. Maybe I could have actually gotten it down a little more succinct. But truly, these are things that are going through my head just by the initial discussions and what we've heard from the public, and then also what staff presented. And again, thank you for your comments. So anyway, that's where I'm thinking.
So just one thing on that. So, Transnet was 20-some years ago, and things change. So I'd kind of be interested in knowing, from bike lanes to freeway expansions, is that still what works now? We need to kind of evaluate that as well.
Okay, so the folks from different parts of the county voted on Transnet because they wanted to be able to get around. So maybe, and this is the part where I was kind of going, and that is, first of all, I think everyone can agree, safety is going to be our number one priority. Getting people out safely if they need to evacuate, that needs to be a first thing. But then also, how are we moving our goods and people? Is it that we have found that over the 20 years, in the corridors that we're investing in, maybe there's an easier way to move them on the corridors. But just remembering that the corridors that have been prioritized, that we're actually moving those people. Like I said, I think it's not changing the priorities, but it's honing down the actual priorities that people voted on in a way that makes more sense today, to just refresh it.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Okay, Mayor Gasterlin.
Great, thank you very much. I'll first echo Rebecca. Safety, goods movement, eliminating congestion through better use of highways, top priorities from my perspective also. So on October 1st, I finished being the chair of the Committee of Planning and Budget for UCSD. And I spent 2 years in that role. We have a $10 billion budget at UCSD. 50% of it comes from federal, 15% from the state, 10% from student tuition. And that's, I turned to Kent and I said, I'm not really seeing today's presentation as complex, but I realize it's because I've been thinking about these items that we've seen for 2 years. And we are frozen at UCSD. We're not hiring, and we haven't since February. Last year, we shrunk our budget by 5%. This year, we're shrinking it by 8%, and we're queuing up to shrink it by 10% next year. That's the total spend going down. And our students are increasing. We have a 2% increase in enrollment in engineering, and we have a major jump in people getting master's degrees. So that's the lay of the land. Why am I telling us about this? Because UCSD is the biggest employer in San Diego County, located in San Diego County. The other one is over in Coronado, and that's the Navy, major presence in Coronado. So this isn't going to end, and not anytime soon. The biotech industry in the region is tied intimately to federal funds from the NIH, which is 67% of the grants, which is 50% of the budget that UCSD gets, are not going up. And that means spending for Thermo Fisher, for example, is not going up, it's going down. And people are running out of money. So we're laying people off. So this is the reality of what's going on. And that's what I bring to the slide that you all had on things being uncertain. My big takeaway was the bottom line is that weakening spending is what we're going to be looking at, and that's due to job insecurity and inflation. So on slide 7, if you could bring it up, 7th slide, it's a graph. No, not that. Just go backwards. I'm bringing the slide up for a reason because it's missing some information to be able to fully understand it. Those green bars, you have monthly, 3.8%, 3.8%. The last one is 4%. And we just heard that the September is going to be 3.9%. And that certainly is not the amount of inflation per month. So could you explain 3.8% of what?
So inflation is typically measured as the consumer price index value for that month as a percent change from the previous year, same month.
Okay, so that's a month.
So it's very unusual to speak about inflation as month-over-month changes.
Good, and the reason I brought that up is part of what makes it complicated for somebody who's seeing a graph like this for the first time, which was me, 2 years ago, is you need to know what the baseline is, 3.8%. And if you don't know, a graph like this can be very confusing. So I wanted to highlight that. And then I wanted to ask, what portion of the state funding that SANDAG gets is from federal sources? Pass-through funds.
I don't know that off the top of my head, because what happens is the federal funding comes in and it gets mixed in with the state funding. And
Right.
so I can't break it out for you right now, because it could be what I would call a state fund, but it has federal funding in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
It just
asked that
depends on
question.
the state.
Yeah, that's additional vulnerability for us,
Certainly.
as the federal is simply not paying their bills. So reimbursement, grants the funds are spent, and then the bill's given to the federal government, and then the money comes back. I don't know if SANDAG works the same way, but that's another question. So I want to lay out 4 questions that I see as the ones that we as board members can have in our head as we're helping Mario, our director, think these through. First question, what can we do with the funds we have in hand? How do we have the most benefit for the most people? And that's where Rebecca's list in many ways highlighted. What is the shrinking value? Second question, what is the shrinking value of the funds in hand due to inflation? Thus, I wanted to make sure of that slide. What will be the increase in costs to construct due to tariffs? We need to know that, and we don't. Are federal funds that have been approved or allocated but not yet received stable? And that goes to my last comment about reimbursement versus actual receiving the funds. So what funds do we really truly have in hand versus what are the funds we've been promised? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we're on to Mayor Sanchez, sorry.
Thank you. And when Mario was talking just before the presentation in terms of strategies, and perhaps one of the strategies that could be considered is cutting up the projects in stages and phases, which is kind of like what ended up happening with Oceanside and the HOV. So if that's actually something that we can refine as an actual strategy and figure out how those projects could be funded at those later stages, right? As a strategy, and there's something else I wanted to mention, but I'm now blanking out. Equity. We're all whole county taxpayers. There were a lot of promises, as was mentioned. I remember when I first got on the council, the Sprinter was like, wow, it goes to nowhere through Oceanside, right? Because it was on an already industrial train track. And so for 25 years ago, we were promised connectors, which I guess now is a micro transit, right? And So I was thinking, oh yeah, it'd be great if we could get people to and from Tri-City Hospital or the mall in Carlsbad, or I worked as a deputy public defender, so of course the courthouse, a ton of people go to the courthouse. It'd be great if, that 2 or 3 hours that the judge from Vista took a bus who lived in Escondido and said, well, no wonder our clients always get there late, right? But that was 25 years ago. So now I think it is more microtransit for Oceanside. The Go side really worked well, in our coastal area. And now we want something more in the middle. So that's something that is going to help us with Oceanside Boulevard and Rancho de Oro Road, because there's a lot of stuff developing there. That's housing, that's jobs, that's parks. Entertainment, with the new arena. How are we going to get people in and out of there, right? So I do think that we need to think about equity, because 76 took a long time and it wasn't a complete project. And I know that really led to the second, ballot measure. And so how do we, all working together, supporting each other? Is it regionally? Obviously, the metro area have different challenges, right, than, say, commuter cities like the farthest north, right? 60%, over 60% of our workforce still drives. Is that something that we'll have to figure out more because the funds are not growing, as everyone is pointing out? What become our priorities? They probably will be different. Maybe what we need to do is talk within regions and talking about the things that are the most important to our regions. I think for Vista too, it's microtransit, right? It's how do we get people within these cities? We have the Sprinter. Yeah, we have the coaster, but why aren't people using them more? And then as to SB 79, I definitely don't want our frequencies down to 15 minutes each, because apparently that's going to be one of the triggers, at least is my understanding at this time. It could change, we'll see. But I think we still need to remember that all taxpayers are paying into this. And hey, they work in different places. So of course they're interested in the city that they're ending up, having to drive to, or maybe they would take mass transit if it was easier, kind of a thing. So I think equity, it's important to remember that we're all in this together, and how what some of these things that we, thought we were asking for, like you said, 25 years ago, may not be the in terms of priorities. And so maybe the things that cost a little less, rather than a major project, maybe those could float to the top, like microtransit.
Great.
Thank you.
So I'm hearing
Equity.
phasing. I'm hearing the last and the first mile, pretty much. Call it microtransit, call it something else. I'm hearing take into consideration upcoming policies or rules and regulations or laws. Okay.
That could seriously, having a 7 to 9 story building in a residential area where it's not next to jobs, the whole idea of having more housing next to transit, next to jobs, that's not what is the definition of our outer areas like North County and East County, right? Thanks.
Very good. These higher level comments are really quite helpful. That's where we're kind of needing to go with this. Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes, thank you. I too want to echo what Mayor Rebecca Jones said, and thank you, Mayor Sanchez, for bringing up equitable and how everybody is a taxpayer and needs to get their share. So, as you know, I'm from Escondido, and we don't have Valley Center or the 5 tribal nations represented here that I work closely with. And what we have is we have 5 tribes that I work with, Rincon, La Jolla, Palma, Paula, San Pasqual, and also Valley Center, and which all are growing. So the population combined right now is at about 65, 70,000, and that is not including the tourism that they have with the casinos. In the last 3 months, there have been 3 fires in Valley Center, and there have been a couple of really bad gridlocks because of evacuations. And currently, there are still, as Mayor Jones brought up, the emergency evacuation route that is desperately needed to connect Lilac Road into Valley Center. There is still only 2 exits. So one would be to take Valley Center northbound to the 79 towards Paula, and a majority of that roadway is a one-way lane. The other is through Valley Center, coming down the hill to Escondido. And it's a 2-way lane, but again, we're talking about gridlock, and it's a very, going through a city. And then also, I think of, and again, thinking of what our first priority is, and the infrastructure, the growth is so important, but the first priority is public safety, preservation, protection of life and property. So I'm just here, I guess I want to say I want to represent their concerns and that they are heard because they don't have a seat at the table currently, and I do work with them, so I wanted to share what their concerns were. And again, to prioritize, to make sure that it is also equitable for those that don't have a seat at the table, but that really do face a real threat on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Second Vice Chair Minto, you're up.
And I have a different thought on a lot of this because regardless of what we talk about here today, it really comes down to money. And I understand, and most of the people I talk with understand that when you talk about materials, whether it's concrete, wood, or metal, or whatever, it's always going to add cost over time to the project. But the millions and millions of dollars that we talk about prior to any kind of construction is what a lot of people say is ridiculous. And so when we talk about this environmental review and that process, the bottom line is this region is about the same no matter where you go. Yeah, the dirt's a little bit different. Maybe the rocks are a little bit different and things of that nature. When you think about it, though, haven't we seen these same elements in the environment over and over and over again throughout all these years? So now we have to hire legal teams, experts, and they have to look at the same dirt and rocks and everything else and water over and over again. Hadn't they already figured that out once? Isn't there some kind of boilerplate that can be used so that it reduces the months and months and sometimes years of environmental review where you know the biological impacts of the soil, the water and the air quality, things are always going to somewhat be the same? Why does it always have to be millions and millions and millions of dollars for the same report over and over and over again? So it has to be streamlined so that things are standardized in that review process. Maybe it is, we just don't hear about that there is a standardized review. And if it is a standardized review, why is it taking so long to get things done? If it is standardized and you apply the same principles and strategies and mitigation measures that have already been identified over and over and over again, can't that reduce the cost? So maybe I'm just speaking rhetorically. I guess the question might boil down to the state laws covering these reviews that were created to make people rich. And maybe not speaking rhetorically.
Thank you. Councilmember Goebel.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have 3 questions I would like to throw into the mix. How will the evaluation of projects consider the impact on the agencies who will assume those projects? Caltrans will have to maintain the freeways that are built. MTS will have to operate a purple line if it's built. North County Transit. It's one thing to build something, it's then who pays for the ongoing costs. And if for instance, at MTS, every ride is a subsidized ride. So it's a catch-22, you have to build a bigger system to make it more competitive. But now if every ride is a subsidized ride, can MTS absorb the cost of operating that? So that has to be in the evaluation of projects. We can't just build projects in a vacuum. Caltrans is going to be faced with, well, we only have so many maintenance dollars, and now we too have to prioritize what we will maintain if you keep building a bigger system, because they don't have a growing set of funds. My second question will be, I'm probably about the third or fourth person to say safety. How will the project score safety or critical to the economy, the movement of goods and workers? That seems to be something that would be paramount more than projects that aren't like that. The third question, probably is in Naomi's backyard, demographics and population estimates. It will be a different world in 20 to 30 years. SANDAG's last forecast of 23 said, we're good for about another 103,000 peak in 2042, and then we're going to start a slide. And with the silver tsunami, does that change people's mobility habits? Are we designing something for a society that may not be that way in 20, 30 years, but it's the way it is today? So how will future projects consider demographics and population shifts in terms of mobility preferences? Those are my three questions. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. Councilmember Cazares.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's being shared. I think that our top priority really needs to be maintaining and truly updating infrastructure equitably throughout the county. So I think the best way to kind of gauge that is by more prioritizing a sub-regional spread versus more focused on the corridor systems, and garnering as much public input as possible. Even though, we are obviously elected to help make decisions for our cities, all of us represent thousands of people, and some represent hundreds of thousands of people. And so being able to garner that, I think, is going to help us better understand our aging and outdated infrastructure. Yes, of course, engineers do too, but we're not all on the same roads every single day. We're not using the same bus routes or trolley routes every single day. For example, SANDAG and the City of La Mesa are working together on the trolley prioritization project. I know we have our first public meeting going on today at the farmers market, because we're considering moving the tracks in our downtown village area so that our main economic hubs are easier and safer to access via transit. I think that is a great example of what we need to be doing all throughout the region, east, north, south, and of course, central. Additionally, I think that spending the more restrictive funding earlier will allow us to use flexible funding for exactly what it sounds like, to be more flexible, because projects are always going to come with some changes that are going to be unplanned for. And so to the extent that we can, being able to use flexible funding later to be able to fill those gaps that we may experience, I think is really important, especially right now, given the lack of reliability in federal funding. So we don't know when we might get paid back. So those are my thoughts. I think emphasizing a sub-regional spread and using flexible funding to be flexible and getting as much public input as possible from across the region. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Shin. Oh, wait.
Oh, can I just mention, this is a disclaimer, we just lost our live video feed. We're working and trying to get this done so people who are online and wish to watch the meeting proceedings, it's still being taped and it will be put up on our different platforms. But I just want to let you know, we just lost the feed, so we're working on it.
Okay, thanks for that. Councilmember Shin.
Thank you, Chair. First, thank you so much for the staff for this presentation. A couple questions for you guys. First with Naomi. When we are talking about the inflationary rate at roughly 3% instead of our 2% standards, how significant is a 1% 5% increase in inflation?
So it depends. When we talk about our headline inflation number that I showed you, that is a reflection of price increases across a basket of goods across the economy. So I think the takeaway is when we think about what's happening in the San Diego economy and what's impacting businesses, we really do want to think about what are local measures. The point is that the inflation is different from national. And then the second piece is that for each business or each segment of the sector in households, where we feel inflationary pressure matters in terms of how they adjust their spending patterns. So a 1% increase in inflation, I mean, we could give you a calculation on what that's lost in GDP, but I think that would override the message, which is that people see these signals, they scale it back, and they're going to scale that back also based on where they see those price increases the most. So we've seen gas prices go down, which has been good. We've seen food prices moderate, and as that changes, people adjust their spending, and we tend to think about that from really a Transnet perspective. It's not answering your question, but it's a complex answer.
I say it in some context because I was recently had my disability retirement through the city, and our cost of living adjustments are only 2%. They're locked at a cap like that. So I'm looking at like if this is a continuance or we find like this is a normalcy, we're also going to find those that are with fixed incomes stuck in positions where their dollar gets reduced by quality, and that's something that is noticed.
So just really quick on that, that's a really important point. So we know Social Security payments, for example, are benchmarked to inflation at a national indicator. And so, again, that divergence between what we're seeing as price pressure in San Diego versus the national is an indicator of where and how we could expect more pressure or disproportionate impact on our communities.
When you're doing your research on the economy, are you noticing that, as I've been researching, that we're kind of living in a time right now of a dual economy where some folks are really rapidly seeing their portfolios rise and then other people are feeling like they're left behind?
We don't, that's certainly pretty consistent with what we're seeing in the chatter in the news streams, and has echoes of what we saw during COVID in terms of the income differential and spending. I think that San Diego is at risk in that space, and this is why when we look at sectors where we're seeing slower job growth becomes such a concern for a bellwether for our region. And so when we know biotech's been hit hard, we know manufacturing has been shedding jobs, professional scientific. So, and then when you think about retail and leisure and hospitality, where they tend to have a higher proportion of lower paying jobs, that's where you start to see the signal about like income differentials in segments of the communities that are going to be harder hit.
Gotcha. This probably question is for all three of you, but so how hard has it been to like truly provide forecasting? We're having inconsistent federal policy changes. So for your personal history, your career history, so I get context of this, is this very abnormal for you guys to have to go, oh my God, I gotta like figure out how to dodge and weave, or is this something that you've been dealing with like, cyclically through like a secular period?
Well, I would say it's most impacted for me when I'm looking at the competitive grant cycles. So we went from an era done under IIJA where there was a lot of competitive programs that were available, and we were matching up and being very aggressive about our competitive funding, and there was a lot of funds that were available. At this point, that's not what we've seen, and so we don't know when the next NOFOs are going to come out. We're watching, we're looking at when those might be coming, but right now it is very uncertain, and that has not been the case over the last 5-7 years from my experience. So on the competitive funding side, definitely a slow up there, and that is impacting our ability to move forward on these larger projects.
Naomi, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but forecasting is difficult to begin with. But how is it challenging right now?
Forecasting is always challenging. I think from a Transnet revenue perspective, we've done fairly decently in the last couple of years since I've been here. You know, if you were to look at what the consensus forecast is from our vendors versus what SANDAG's been programming, we've been far more conservative and closer to what's been actuals. So, I mean, we're lucky in that we're very data informed and we are constantly monitoring. So I think in an environment like this, the forecasting is always just a point on the horizon. The agility of the agency in responding to signals and course corrections earlier than later is what's important, and I think that's a key part of this strategy that it's signaling.
Yeah, I mean, Google, Naomi says, right, it's always changing. Is it difficult? Yeah. I think what Naomi talks about too is you forecast, you estimate, you make adjustments based on that, and then you get there, right, and you take a look, how far are you off, and you adjust. And you're constantly in that adjustment. So to, my history previously with Caltrans, had gone through some of these, it's cyclical. So there were times we originally came in 2007, 2008, we're on projects that all of a sudden, money wasn't there, prices go up, and you're what do we do, right? And it's a lot where at the time, Mario mentioned the bonding and the region, what SANDAG did to get a lot of these projects through. And you make adjustments and you figure it out. And then you come through the opposite where a lot of money came in. And I remember lots of conversations of, at the time we're on the cost estimates and you're getting hounded. Why are your estimates always coming under, always coming under? We have to, you go to award and you're 10, 15% under bid. We have to add more money. And it was not even a year later, right? It was all of a sudden, we're 10% below. Why are you leaving money on the table? How do we put this money to work? And so you're constantly, they say, working to try to estimate where you at and always following this. Is it difficult? Yeah, but that's our job, right? That's what we're doing. And so what we're talking about today is how do you be flexible enough because you're estimating what is, but you're never going to be perfect, right? It's never going to be exactly right. But how can you set yourself up to take advantage of whatever those opportunities are to limit your risk and make sure that you are flexible for those changing times?
Gotcha. And back to Clint. You were explaining that there have been federal initiatives for advancing technologies. Can you explain that a little bit more?
This came from the U.S. DOT had sent out an informational, and it was just kind of touching on some of their points. There was not a lot of details behind it, but it kind of gives you a hint of what we might expect in the next federal authorization, right? We're still under IIJA for another year. And so the technologies could be, how do we, it goes hand in hand with the last bullet of be able to not be reliant on future federal or state obligations to maintain these systems. And that conversation came up a lot. So how do you use technologies so you're not just widening freeways, but put in whether it's tolling systems or other things to make the system more, better throughput, right, without just constructing more lanes, right? So how do you tie technologies, whether we had conversation on Harbor 2.0, right, you tolling systems on the managed lanes, or also tying technology, whether it's apps, phones, and getting more efficiency out of the system. And so that's what they're talking about, technology. How do you get people from a bus to a trolley to the highway and be able to connect those? And also, how can we use technologies for emergency evacuations, right, for those things? So.
Yeah, I don't know if this is for you, for Mario, but are we having conversations with our transportation agencies in regards to like the justification, kind of like maybe what Mayor Jones is saying, like, are we asking for reports to justify exactly, the buses, the rails, how much are we subsidizing in regards to it, or are we actually getting a return on investment by having them? Are these reports provided for us? Do they have it that are easy to be accessed?
Well, a couple of things. We need to also land on our realities. SANDAG is the MPO, and it has some implementing authority. There are operators, the owner-operators, like it was mentioned, and the idea is always work hand by hand. You're never going to build something if you don't talk to your operator, right? That's a mistake. You can't go and propose a silver line to the moon if nobody's going to be able to maintain it. Or asking Ann to maintain a triple-decker freeway or something like that, and she goes, with what, right? So we are having those conversations all the time. I think that's called the Regional Transportation Plan, where the agencies input and tell us what they can do and cannot do. I have working meetings, the entire team, with MTS management in a monthly or bi-monthly basis, North County Transit, with Caltrans. Oh my God, we're pulling our hairs together on how to get things done or whatnot. They think it's not doable or doable. So we are having a lot of those coordination meetings, pushing the envelope, but we're not the owner-operators. And that's something that we also need to understand. Transnet gives a percentage. I think it's the 8% give or take for the operators, for their operations costs, but they also have to deal with their own entire budgets and their own boards to figure that out. So it's a team effort, but we do provide those metrics. We should provide them for better decisions, and we'll work on that. But we also need to understand the atmosphere that we're working, that SANDAG is not just the sole responsible of managing the system. We have a part of it, and then the owner-operators have another part of it.
Yeah, I just think I don't know if it's within our capacity to do so, but if, for like my city and region up north, it's nice to just know what the usage is of public transportation, right? And then I can either stand firm and justify it or say, hey, we actually we need to wait until capacity is filled before we consider doing more projects there. And we have other projects that we need to focus on as opposed to, let's say, bus, rail, or roads, right? Just some comments that I have. And when it comes to the economy right now, like I'm trying to open up a restaurant, I'm dying to. I'm trying to have this thing pencil out, but nothing's penciling out right now. And so sometimes I feel like I'm that canary, like, for everyone to know, oh, okay, when Kevin opens up a business, the economy is finally opened up. I do see a dual economy, not just with those that are, like, say, roughly under 40, that are just trying to figure out how can I get a job, how can I even ever buy a home, to those that are like myself that are over 40 who have built a portfolio. And I'm watching that portfolio just grow. I don't even know what I'm doing, but it looks like I'm smart. So I see it in small and versus large businesses right now. Our compression right now, if you're a small business owner and you're the one kind of handling all the departments, is completely different than a large-scale business who has different departments and human resource and marketing and firms. They are able to scale above and beyond the tariffs and the inflations, whereas the mom and pop shops like ourselves just cannot. And transportation is a big deal in regards to retail and restaurants. If you think about it, I get in my restaurant like 3 to 5 shipments a day, and a lot of times they're coming from down here, and they're like, we couldn't make it, traffic, this, that. And so I feel it on my end. When it comes to emerging technologies, I think we actually really do need to start focusing on this. I tell those that are not really trying to catch the wave on understanding artificial intelligence and what this is about to take place are going to miss the wave. For the same people who decided that all they want to do is lick a stamp and put on an envelope, as opposed to learning what emails are from back in our day, right? So there's a lot going on in regards to autonomous mobility. I inquired to some different companies to just see what are they doing in the San Francisco, LA, and Phoenix areas. I was taking to heart Supervisor Aguirre's comments in regards to the disadvantaged, and they are working on projects to be able to help in that fashion. But if we're not having conversations with them, how can we plan for what they're trying to do? The private sector is trying to do something, and if we're not listening, we're not going to plan accordingly. And then it's going to look messy like when Uber came in and we didn't know where they needed to land on the airport parking lot until we figured it out afterwards. So it would be nice for us to be ahead of the game and try to figure that aspect out. And then kind of last but not least, but I think the key words, one, Naomi put it well, is agility, but the other word that I keep looking at is justification. So when I say the justification of what these other transportation agencies are doing, like we want to feel confident of providing a product for them because they've justified it. I think that our costs sometimes, and maybe this, I don't know if we can even factor this through economic analysis, but when we build something, what is our ROI? Meaning that did we just scale business in a greater way because we free flowed traffic so that now I have more customers, I get my products ready and available, and do we get to see that? Because that ends up being sales tax. And so I want to see a wider berth of revenue through volume of business as opposed to rate. And I'll say that forever. I think we need to humbly review previously assumptions of how we plan things from rail, buses, roads, and housing, because what we're assuming how housing goes is sometimes I just feel like the product isn't really what's being applicable for the areas that we're in. And then last but not least, this justification does require research, so I know that that's where we're going to have to be stressed on, as well as communication. So I'm not being paid by Robin, but I swear, like, her department needs to have the capacity to be able to tell us so that we can tell the public exactly what's going on. That's all.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Chavez.
Thank you, and I'm going to be very brief on my comments. I agree with mostly everything, except that when we see the region as a whole, that we have the same similar issues going on. The Blue Line moves 2.2 million a month, and we have a daytime population of around 100,000 people and growing that come through, work, study, tourism. And I know there's issues in other cities where they don't want to see the accordion buses, right? That it's just a nuisance. They have one person. Sometimes they don't have any. And sometimes I, sit and see other trolley lines with maybe one passenger, right? And I understand. I completely agree with the microtransit. I know that wheelchair accessibility is very needed, and sometimes our regular app drivers don't have this. And a lot of people have come up to me in the South Bay and say how much they rely on this micro transit that is provided by MTS and so much needed. If anything, I would ask we consider more transit in the South Bay because we actually opened the 910 recently earlier this year that after 11:45 p.m. we didn't have transit going back to the border region, and that was very, very much needed for a lot of people that get off work after 11:30 p.m. And that also is a huge contribution to our region. And I just have a quick question. You mentioned the losses are not that we were seeing losses across the border with manufacturing, trade, and the professional sectors taking a hit, yet healthcare and tourism remain on the rise. I'd like to see that specific information from where it's coming from, where it's impacting positively, so we can help. And maybe if these are on the rise, how can we be an asset to bring more of that? That is my question and my comment. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Aguirre.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to caveat my comments by reminding us that government is a non-for-profit entity, that is not in search of return on investment, but rather making the use of taxes in the most efficient way for those who pay them. Now, I really appreciated the comments that Mayor Jones mentioned earlier about the past, right, and making sure that we meet our commitments. It's important to look at the present as well, because when we're talking about sources of funding, we have two very different levels of government, right? Right now, the state is looking at climate-funded grants. So we have to look at that as well. The federal's looking at safety. We have to make sure of that. And every region has very different priorities. I am very clear on Northeast County being impacted by increasing housing, not enough corridors, wildfires in the wildland-urban interface. That's a real issue. Coastal, limited transit, first and last mile mobility is important, as it is to Imperial Beach too. Subsidize public transit, that's important to Vice Mayor Chavez's point. The blue line, I could sit here arguing all day that that is the backbone of the entire public transit system in the county. It moves, as you said, 2.2 million people. With the housing crisis, we have more people moving into Mexico. That's putting a burden on our cross-border congestion by car, by transit. So I could sit here and advocate all day for District 1 and say, hey, we have the biggest need. But I don't think that's the way we should do this, right? I think it's 18 jurisdictions plus us, the county, and this board. So I really appreciated Mayor Sanchez's suggestion about taking a regional approach so each region can prioritize what the priorities we see are, because they're going to be very unique and different. And we're going to make an assessment on future forecasts of sociodemographics and housing, right? For example, right now, the work hubs, or what are they called? Workforce hubs, right, are in North County. I think Vice Mayor Gasserman was mentioning that about UCSD. But we can make the same argument for South County. We're trying to bring a university down there. We're trying to bring a film studio, not to mention the cross-border and the fastest growing district in housing in East Chula Vista, right? So that would be my humble suggestion, is that we look at regions, we look at forecasts and sociodemographic and economic components, and then we make an informed decision that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Duncan.
Thank you. I don't really have much of an issue with pretty much anything that was said, and I am an information person, but I would definitely caution that if you study everything, then you're not going to end up getting anything done. We have resources, and we're trying to get some things done. So one of my comments, because the title of what we're talking about today is Project Funding, Overview, Strategy, and Considerations. So back to something that the CEO said at the start, which is this board open to the concept of moving money that's sitting in a construction fund for a project that's not going to be used for a lengthy period of time, and potentially moving that to another project that's ready for construction. So I'm very supportive of that type of study and information being brought to us with options. Obviously there's, and so I really support that and want staff and want you to lead bringing those options to us, because yes, there will be pain, and people will say, well, wait a minute, if you take it from this project on the 5 that's down in, up in North County or down in South County and move it to the middle or to the north or south or vice versa, does that mean my project, in my region may never happen? What does it really mean? So what is the risk if we move those funds? But when you look at inflation, I don't really care if it's 2% or 4%. What difference does it really make to me, other than it makes projects harder? But when that happens, it happens, right? So I can't control it. But what I do know for a fact is whether or not it's 2% or 3% or 4%, is that it's never, when they say inflation goes down, it does not mean things get cheaper. It means the rate of the increase in the cost of them is less than it might have been the year before. So what that leads me to recommend when we talk about construction funds and the way I'm speaking about them, or other funds that could be moved, is that when we spend them now, we will have a better bang for our dollar. So that is sort of my, justification for my desire to have SANDAG look at that, combined with what the CEO said earlier, which is actually delivering on some projects sooner rather than later, both for all of the region and for the public. Completing projects should also be at the top of our list of goals. So that's where I support in regard to project funding strategy that you were asking about at the start. I just want to mention one other thing because it comes up in this concept as well, and I know we've mentioned it many times at our board meetings recently when discussing SB 79. I just want to remind that there were quite a few amendments to SB 79 right before it passed. Originally, there was Tier 1, 2, and 3, and they took out 3 of the ferry landings. But Tier 1 is basically heavy rail and frequent rail usage, so very high frequency commuter rail or heavy rail transit. So that's Tier 1. Tier 2, dealing with high frequency, buses and the definitions that, have been alluded to. I just want to point out they added, and when we think about planning and what it might do to different cities or parts of the region, they added this language that says when a new transit route or extension is planned that was not identified in the applicable regional transportation plan on or before January 1st, 26, those stops shall not be eligible as a transit-oriented development stop unless they would be eligible as Tier 1, meaning heavy usage rail or heavy commuter rail. So the reason this was put in was so that new planning for bus routes after January 2026, it's not in regional plans, would not fall into the SB 79 development criteria, taking away local control on those. But I also caution that doesn't mean that they may not issue a new law in the near future as soon as you do it, saying now they do comply, right? So, but I just wanted to mention that because if that's what part of our analysis on planning projects, we should probably get a firm grip on if my understanding of that law is accurate or not. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Melendez, who's online.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the discussion. I'm hearing our strategy that we are valuing and prioritizing safety, mass movement, and our economies. And there are different projects which help us accomplish these goals throughout the region. But I do believe we need to prioritize transparency and consistency. And I want to bring up a change in our approach. I've been on this board for about 3 years, and I'm sure other members who've been here longer could speak to this. And since the beginning, since I've been here, the SANDAG board and staff and whole agency has expressed a commitment to diversifying projects and distributing resources throughout the county, and that you would consider individual agencies, our general plans, our priorities, our investments, and that if we were competitive, that we would have an opportunity to provide more for our constituency. And now we're being asked to refocus our resources. And here's a specific example of that. And this has to do with grade separation. In 2023, the city of Vista was able to secure funding from the Federal Transportation Administration for a grade separation study. And our findings on that study should be allowing us to move forward with a project for that corridor. In North County, we are very behind. The Sprinter corridor is more than a commuter line, which I believe needs to increase its headways to 15 minutes. It's also essential for freight and for defense. But we are not getting the level of investment that we need in North County. And thank you, Supervisor, for articulating the real dynamics between state and federal funding, because there's no need to point fingers, but we do need to acknowledge how a change in financing and resources and our strategy is going to impact agencies like the City of Vista, who have made the right investments. We're making the right investments, and we're performing the right studies in order to impact our region. And yet we are being asked to refocus our support, and we are at risk of losing support from this agency because of a lack of resources. So I do want that to be acknowledged. But I also want to talk about ridership in North County Transit District that was brought up a few times. And when we talk about a return on investment, we don't have that same demand for our highway expansions. We hear about transit being subsidized, but our entire highway system is also subsidized. And with the gas tax becoming obsolete, our subsidy to maintain our vehicle roadways is about to become even more severe. But for North County Transit District and our NCTD Plus program, my understanding was that NCTD Plus in Vista is actually filling a gap in a bus route that was eliminated. And so it's not just an alternative. These microtransit solutions are now being proposed as a way to fill the gap for that transit need. And so when we talk about equity and transportation, we have to lay out a plan for how we're going to prioritize transportation for the working poor. And it's not through microtransit alone. There needs to be regional investments in public transportation, including in North County along our Sprinter line, with grade separation and support to increase ridership by increasing headways and reliability of that Sprinter rail. So I do understand that we're limited in our resources. We always have been. But our approach changing drastically from being competitive and being willing to pursue diverse projects to now, we're being asked to, invest our efforts elsewhere. I think that we need to acknowledge, and I've heard it from some of the board members, but I do think that we need to acknowledge as a board that yes, we do have distinct needs in our own regions and agencies.
I do want to just mention, like on my speaking points, we're not swapping projects. We're not eliminating projects. We're actually looking at where those bigger needs are. And let me mention, the Sprinter is a line where I think SANDAG should get more involved. It is one of those commuter lines that we do need to have eventually a longer discussion of, do we continue with the idea of double tracking the Lausanne line to later get to a one-liner in Orange County and LA? Or do we slow down? We have 70% already double track. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying those are good discussions to have. Great separations both in the south and the north, including the Sprinter, are critical to get the mobility of people. I've said many times, you see Chula Vista and San Marcos as booming towns where we need to figure out how we're going to move people between those cities as well as their neighboring cities. And great separations both for the Blue Line, for the Sprinter, and other rail lines are going to be critical. But I do want to put it on the table. We are not talking about shifting strategies or eliminating projects. We're talking about being nimble, flexible, and effective in our delivery strategies.
Thank you. Our next speaker is First Vice Chair LaCava.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mario, for that, I think, clarification. I would hope that there's a little bit of pivoting going forward because I think some ideas that have been around for a long time that haven't gotten funding have now started to get some traction. And so I know those are difficult conversations. And while we have achieved a relative sense of calm on the board, we don't want to disrupt that. But I think the opportunity to kind of relook, and especially whether, as you've introduced, talking about moving away from the mega project idea to let's take the limited funds we have and actually get something done on the ground, I think is an important pivot point going forward. And that doesn't take away that project. It just says, let's do this segment today, because otherwise we're waiting 10, 20 years out to be able to do that. And certainly the 78, the 67 are really great examples of that kind of different kind of thinking. And I really appreciate all the comments of everybody's and I think I've coalesced it to just build all the City of San Diego projects and then take care of all the rest. And I think that'll solve our problems.
And with that, we'll go to
I knew
Councilmember Lee.
I knew I kind of set myself up. But I also think about the regional transportation plan that we're a few weeks away from adopting, has built into it a sales tax measure at some future date. And the question is, how are we going to be speaking to the voters who may have a lack of trust, which has been mentioned several times, in terms of what previous transit promised and never got delivered for a wide variety, I think, of very valid reasons. And how much do we think about that future conversation? I don't want us to go whole hog and just say, let's just do a lot of highly visible projects so we can gain the support of the voters, but we should also not be ignore that as well going forward. And I appreciated, Mario, that you also kind of mentioned that you also mentioned where SANDAG has been in the past. The decision at this point was this approach, and then a few years later, it's like maybe that's really not working. Let's take this approach. And while I would like nimble to be our middle name, that's hard to have that, hard for us to be able to do that. So whether we're setting a course that maybe in today's world looks better, it will take years for us to decide, was that really the good idea? So for us all to be thoughtful. And I know the whole part of this conversation is, in fact, to be very thoughtful about what we're doing. So I hope that all these comments can be coalesced into kind of a strategy, but I think to me the most important one is that last one, that emphasis about focusing on phased approach rather than trying to save the nickels and dimes to finally fully fund the mega project is probably the most important change that we can do. And I think the harder one is, I was kind of leaning towards more of the corridor systems versus the sub-regional, but I think the comments that I've heard this morning have really kind of swayed me that it isn't that simple to be able to do that, even though more corridor projects may create more stuff on the ground that our constituents and voters would appreciate. We are a region that has quite a bit of variety from east, south, west, and north on that, so need to be a little more careful about that. So much more to talk about. I'm going to stop there, but look forward to seeing how staff will coalesce all that into a kind of a unifying strategy. So thank you for bringing this item forward. Thank you for the good work that you put into the presentation. Chair?
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by saying no comment on Vice Chair's plea to prioritize the City of San Diego first. But I want to thank Mario for setting the stage with some of the conversation and to thank the staff for, of course, sharing the challenges that you face when it comes to funding decisions. When I look at the RTP, I would like to believe, I'm sure we'd all like to believe that the RTP is a reflection of the balance between the wish list of the region and some recognition that there are funding limitations in what we can accomplish. But I'm sure, like many other plans we've seen, past iterations of those wish lists grow very long. And I think that's what partially creates this desire that we're going to do something with every bit of it. And I would point out the previous iterations that RTP also counted on a significantly larger possibility for revenue than what we're looking at right now, which may again spur this idea that, well, if we have this larger expanded future opportunity, then in order to get projects moving, we're going to need to put multiple pieces in different phases now early on. So it's not to say that that wasn't part of the picture. It's just that's where we've been for some time. And I think the reality of where we stand today is we recognize that funding capacity is very limited. There's a significant amount of uncertainty, and that means the strategy does have to change as a result. Our ability to start and hope that a dozen projects might move forward in the next decade may not be the same as it was a decade ago. So as much as I appreciate the complexities of how we make these funding decisions, I do think the discussion that we've had about regional priorities is really important here, because there is a very big difference between what the community needs and what they want to see prioritized versus what we actually have the ability to fund and accomplish. And those things may not align all the time. And I think what we hope is that by developing the RTP, that we find avenues where those do find alignment. And frankly, there are a lot of moments where we're going to turn to staff and we're going to need your expertise in determining what priorities have come out of this board and through our communities end up actually being fundable and within what timelines. And I think that reality is what helps us give you better direction over where to put our resources in a shorter time frame. Because again, looking out for the next 25 years, it's easy to say that here's all the things we want to see get done. But I think we struggle with this at the City of San Diego. There are a lot of times we draw up plans that plan for capacity, for what our wish list is for the future, but it's hard for us to actually determine what is produced. And so to Mayor Duncan's point, my priority oftentimes is that I think we need to see projects come to fruition, and that there's a need to actually plan for projects happening versus that just a longer term plan of setting a stage for the future. So it's no easy task, but I mean, that's what we're all here to do. So thank you.
And I think just to put it out there very transparently, a while ago there was some thoughts that this was a staff-driven organization. This is a board-driven organization. So we're bringing the conversation to all of you to give us, the big items, right? The big pillars. And like you said, you're going to look into staff on their recommendations, and you agree or disagree with them. But the part for today is telling you what's in our mind, hearing what your thoughts are, seeing the bearings, and coming with a proposal that is not going to be cast in stone. Because like we said, we're going to have to be really nimble based on whatever win or headwind we get. And so this is one of the most valuable conversations I have had in my last 14 months here, because this builds on that relationship of where you're providing us guidance so we can come out and bring you some educated proposals.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson.
I didn't know I was coming up. I wasn't picking the last fight. I agree with everything that everyone said about their concerns, about their region, the area they represent. But I'm a pragmatic guy. And we have 4 columns here. We might want to add a partial 5th column that's electability, because everything we want to accomplish requires more money. I'm not sure we're going to get more money from the feds or from the state. So if we are looking internally, I want to remind you, this is not so much for staff, but for my colleagues, 1 in every 7 residents of San Diego County lives in the unincorporated. I can assure you 500,000 people voting no because they have received little to no benefit from their tax dollars. And thank you, Mr. LaCava, for, while you were funny with the San Diego portion, you did mention 67. So I would caution, as you're moving forward with this perfect world, that you live in the world that we actually exist in, and that 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Unless we change our attitude, I can assure you, along with everybody that lives in the unincorporated, is going to be voting against it. Because everything we were promised in the last tax measure, of which we passed, we've gotten 0. 0. So when you're thinking 67, that could be a good idea, but gosh, we need more ridership. Yeah, enjoy your ridership, because you're never going to see another bus. Enjoy your ridership, because you're not going to see another friggin' tax. Unless, of course, magically, you can get 100% of your district to vote for it. So I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade, but I think that when we're looking at this, we really need to be thinking in terms of electability, and you have to be able to go back to every community and say, you received some value. You're not going to get 100% of your money back. Nobody's expecting that. But we've gotten zero. So, and by the way, just for a lot of the folks who have never been to Julian, East County doesn't really end in Lemon Grove. I'm not saying that in a bad way. We love Lemon Grove. But think in terms of east of El Cajon. Think in terms of, east of Chula Vista. Think in terms of Fallbrook and some of these other areas, because we really haven't received anything. And look, I love all the plans that y'all are making. I'm not against them, but I'm thinking pragmatically, how do I go back to my communities and say, this is why you should vote for it? Because now you're having to make choices between whether your kids have anything. We have areas that don't have buses that'll ever get us to a beach. And yet, we're talking about how we want more buses and more free rides when some people don't even have a ride. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendoza.
I forgot that I needed to hit the 0 in order to speak. I just remembered that. I'm not.
You're up there, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I haven't heard anyone mention this, and maybe it's obvious, but I heard someone say that Transnet funds can provide local match for other grant projects. And so I think that should definitely remain a priority, and that's something that we should highlight or publicize more to the public, because even if, where'd he go? Even like Supervisor Anderson was saying, maybe the whole project isn't funded by Transnet, but even if people know that just a portion of their tax dollars is going to make a project happen in their community, we need to let them know that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And now we're going for a second round. Mayor Jones.
I'm going to be quick. Someone said something, and I think in real time. I'm so sorry, Chair. I just wanted to bring up, just thinking about land use and how things are changing. Scripps Green is going to be closing, and there's going to be another tower at Scripps La Jolla, but then the change with Scripps Green closing is going to be the new hospital in San Marcos. And the reason I bring this up is just thinking about large employers, and then Gaylord now is open in Chula Vista. So when we're thinking about corridor projects, we need to think about things that are also on the horizon, that, large investments with a lot of traffic, and how we're going to handle that. And, one of the things also is, we talked about that BRT coming from Temecula down. How is that going to possibly benefit also from Scripps opening up in San Marcos? And I don't know that that's been factored in, so just wanted to bring that up. Just in everything that we're doing, how that actually connects. Thank you.
Mayor Sanchez, don't take that bite. You're up next.
Thank you. Well, having heard our representative from the City of Vista, we obviously have to have these discussions at a regional level, I think is very, very critical. Of course, we're talking about the Sprinter. And so far, my understanding is if we double track, if that were to happen, say tomorrow, okay, let's just say that, double track and also frequencies at every 15 minutes, we're doomed in Oceanside. We're doomed because 7 to 9 stories in single family residential areas where it's not designed for that, it would completely destroy our ability to even support these areas. So it would be a hard no for me, but this is where we need to have these discussions. Maybe it can be, as you said, phased, but for us, I even heard someone say, well, let's just get rid of these stops, right? That's an extreme. but I don't even know if that would even work, right? So we need to have these discussions. I don't think we've ever had that room space to be able to do that with staff in trying to come up with, say, final goals. But I think that they obviously are necessary, needed for us to come up with agreements. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for bringing that up. Yes, there's unintended consequences from some of the state legislature, and I've heard more electeds than not say, I don't want increases in frequency on transit now because of the implications that would mean for the land use around their areas. So it's a frustrating development that we've seen come from Sacramento. Okay, so these were really great comments, really super good discussion. This item requires no action, so we don't have any continued non-agenda. All right. So, hey, 12:35. And this concludes our meeting. The next Board of Directors meeting will be Thursday, October 30th at 9 a.m. And that's going to be a closed session. And then we have one again on the 31st, the next day, Halloween.